Hey guys, tonight we're heading back in time, not to a gilded palace or a king's court, but to the darkest, dirtiest corner of a medieval village. We're going to step into the worn leather apron of a blacksmith, a person who, if you're imagining some kind of muscular, hammer-wielding superhero, you're about to be sorely disappointed. You're going to feel the searing heat on your face, the grit of iron dust in your lungs, and the constant, thrumming ache in your hands and back. This isn't the kind of history where you just sit back and watch. You're in it. A part of the dirt, the smoke, and the endless clang. You'll be a vital part of the community, but you'll pay for that privilege with every inch of your body. You probably won't survive this without at least one lifelong injury. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand there, a ghost of a man in the dim light of your own making. The air is thick with the coppery scent of hot metal and the acrid smoke of burning charcoal. You rub a calloused hand over your sooty forehead, leaving a dark smear. The sun isn't even a rumour on the horizon yet. But your day began an hour ago when you stirred the embers of the forge to life. This is your life, a perpetual dance with fire and steel. You look around your small, cramped workshop, a ramshackle hut of wood and daub that's more furnace than home. The floor is packed earth, uneven and littered with metal scraps. The walls are stained black from years of smoke. The ceiling a web of soot-coated cobwebs. Outside, the world is quiet, but inside, a quiet hum is already building, a low, expectant murmur from the bellows. Your muscles are still stiff from yesterday's work, a dull ache in your shoulders and lower back that never truly goes away. You're not a brawny hero, you're a man of sinew and bone, worn down by a relentless, monotonous labour. The romantic notion of a blacksmith as a creator of glorious swords and shining armour is a lie. Your reality is a world of mending broken ploughshares, hammering out endless nails, and patching up rusty tools. The work is necessary, vital to the survival of the village, but it's far from glamorous. Each new day brings the same grind, the same struggle against the stubbornness of iron as the embers glow to life. You think of the villagers, they'll be coming soon, a steady stream of requests, each one a different challenge. A farmer needs a sickle sharpened, a carpenter needs a new set of hinges, and, perhaps, if you're lucky, a merchant from the city will arrive with a commission that might actually pay you enough to buy a bit of meat for the family. But for now, you just tend the fire. You reach for the ancient, leather-bound bellows, pumping air into the heart of the forge. The fire crackles, spits, and roars in protest. You lean in, your face flushed with the sudden rush of heat, and you watch the dancing flames. This fire is your lifeblood, your master, and your tormentor. It gives you the power to shape the world, but it also dictates every moment of your existence. This is the life of a medieval blacksmith. You don't have a schedule, you have a rhythm, the rhythm of the bellows, the rhythm of the hammer, the rhythm of the rising sun. There's no such thing as a day off when a broken tool could mean a family starves. You are the village's lifeline, but your value is only as good as your last repair. You're a tradesman, a labourer, and a forgotten cog in the wheel of history. You feel the iron in your soul, the weight of responsibility, and the endless, tiring ache in your body. It's a thankless job, full of hazards and little reward. Historians still argue whether the perceived low social status of a blacksmith was a result of the trade's association with dirt and fire, or if it was tied to the constant, demanding physical labour that left no time for higher pursuits like farming or learning. You, however, don't have time to ponder such things. You just have to survive. A curious tidbit you'll learn is that blacksmiths were sometimes seen as magical due to their ability to transform a cold, dead piece of ore into a useful tool. This led to a lot of folklore and superstition around the craft. You'll hear later how people would pay extra for a horseshoe to be made with a certain chant or ritual, believing it would bring good luck. But for you, it's just work, just another piece of iron you need to wrestle into submission. You reach for the first lump of ore, your hands, calloused and hard, finding their familiar grip. The long day has officially begun. The fire, your master, your tormentor, is finally roaring. Its orange light dances across the smoky walls, making the shadows writhe like demons. You've been at this for an hour, pumping the bellows, coaxing the heat, and now the forge is a beast, alive and hungry. You wipe a stream of sweat from your brow with a forearm, feeling the sting of the heat on your already reddened skin. The temperature in this small hut is suffocating, a humid, heavy blanket that clings to you and refuses to let go. You're always hot. In the winter, it's a blessing, but for most of the year, it's just a constant drain on your energy. Your body is perpetually dehydrated, and your thirst is a familiar, nagging companion. You step closer, the firelight catching the glint in your eyes, which are constantly squinting against the smoke and glare. Your clothes, what little you have, are singed and stiff with grime. You've long since given up on keeping them clean. There's no point. The soot and ash are a permanent part of your being, a second skin of labor and dust. You can feel the heat radiating from the brick-lined forge, a powerful, invisible force that seems to press in on all sides. It's a heat that gets into your bones, a deep warmth that never truly leaves. This is the heart of your world, this roaring furnace. It's the source of your livelihood and the source of your misery, and the dangers. Oh, the dangers. You're not just battling iron, you're battling fire itself. A stray spark can land on your wooden floor or your thatched roof, and the whole place could go up in a brilliant, terrifying flash. You have a bucket of water nearby. But it's more of a symbolic gesture than a real defense. A good fire would consume your entire life's work in minutes, leaving you with nothing but a pile of ash. Then there are the more personal dangers, the burns. You have them all over your hands and arms. Some are just red and angry, while others are thick, white scars from more serious encounters. You've learned to move with a kind of second-nature caution, a constant awareness of where the red-hot metal is and where your own flesh is. Historians still argue whether medieval blacksmiths had a shorter life expectancy than other tradesmen. While some studies point to the dangers of the job, others suggest that the physical strength required and the constant exposure to heat might have built up a certain resilience. You, however, are a living testament to the hazards. Just last week, a piece of slag, the glassy waste from smelting, flew off the anvil and hit your cheek. It left a painful welt and a constant reminder of how quickly a mistake can turn into a serious injury. A quirky tidbit to soothe their burns. Blacksmiths would sometimes use a mixture of honey and salt, which was believed to have healing properties. It probably just made the sting a little more interesting. But you're not one to argue with old wives' tales when there's nothing else to be done. You reach for the tongs, their long handles already warm from the ambient heat. Your hands are a patchwork of scars, calluses, and dark smudges. They're not pretty hands, but they're strong. They know their way around the hammer and anvil better than they know how to hold a cup of wine. The tongs are a crucial extension of your arm, a way to keep a safe distance from the blistering heat of the newly glowing iron. But they're not perfect. They can slip. They can drop the piece. And you can find yourself in a world of hurt in a second. You learned that the hard way. You hear a faint shuffling outside. The first customer of the day, a farmer, likely, with a broken hoe or a dull scythe. He'll probably have a couple of copper coins to pay you. If you're lucky, more likely, he'll offer a handful of vegetables or a promise to pay you back after the next harvest. You sigh. A long, tired breath that feels like a puff of smoke. The rhythm of your life is about to begin in earnest. The rhythmic pounding of hammer on anvil will be the soundtrack to your day. A ceaseless, jarring sound that will echo in your ears long after the sun goes down. The heat is just the start of your day, a constant, oppressive reminder of the brutal work that lies ahead. You grab the first piece of raw iron, your tongs clenching tight, and you prepare to plunge it into the heart of the fire. Your tongs bite into the glowing iron, pulling it from the heart of the fire. The air shimmers around the white-hot metal, and you can almost feel its heat on your eyelids. You lay the piece on the anvil, a block of solid, unforgiving steel that has been your only constant companion. The ringing silence is broken by the sharp, metallic clang of hammer on iron. The sound is brutal, deafening. It fills your head and vibrates through the soles of your feet. It's a sound that has made you a bit deaf over the years. A constant, high-pitched ringing in your ears that you've long since learned to ignore. You swing the hammer again and again and again. Your movements are practiced, repetitive dance. The hammer itself is not a thing of beauty. It's a heavy, unrefined chunk of iron with a crude wooden handle. There are no ergonomic grips, no fancy counterweights. It's just weight and momentum. Your hands, thick with calluses and permanently stained with rust and soot, know its every nuance. You know just how to strike it to get the metal to move, to bend, to stretch. One wrong angle, one misplaced blow, and the iron will spring back. The vibrations rattling up your arm and numbing your shoulder. You're not just swinging a hammer, you're wrestling with a material that wants to remain in its raw, stubborn state. All of your tools are like this. The tongs are often lopsided, the files are worn and slick, and the chisels are chipped and dull. You made most of them yourself. A testament to your own skill, but also a stark reminder of the difficulty of your trade. There's no Home Depot here. No place to buy the latest and greatest. You make do with what you have, and you mend what is broken. This is a constant cycle, one that keeps you in business but also keeps you in a state of perpetual disrepair. You're a shoemaker with holes in his own boots. You are your best customer, constantly needing to fix your own equipment just to do the work of fixing others. A quirky fact you probably don't know is that many medieval blacksmiths had a specific hammer for each type of work, with different weights and head shapes, one for drawing out the metal, another for flattening, and a third for finishing. You, however, probably only have one or two, and you've learned to use them for every single task. You are a true generalist, a jack of all trades with a hammer in your hand. This versatility is what makes you so valuable, and it's also what makes you so exhausted. You can't specialize when the village needs you to do everything. Historians still argue whether the crude nature of medieval tools was a reflection of a lack of metallurgical knowledge or simply a result of the extreme difficulty and time-consuming process of creating more refined instruments. You don't have time to think about that. You just have to make a tool that works. And you have to do it with the tools you already have. You think about the simple, straight-up pain you've had to endure to make some of your tools, the blisters, the burns, the smashed fingers. It's a part of the process, a payment in blood and sweat for the privilege of working. You watch the iron begin to yield, its resistance finally breaking down under your blows. You see the metal stretch and lengthen, the molecules inside rearranging themselves to your will. It's a magical process. Even though you know the cold, scientific reality of it, you're a creator, a transformer. You're taking something from the earth and giving it a new purpose. Yet it's a fleeting moment of satisfaction in a day filled with drudgery. The ringing in your ears fades to a dull roar, and you can focus on the rhythmic thump-clang of your hammer hitting the iron against the anvil. You're no artist. You're a craftsman. You don't create for beauty. You create for utility. Your work must be strong. It must be reliable. And it must last. And you do it all with a set of tools that look like they were made by a child. The farmer from earlier steps in, his face haggard and lined with worry. He holds out a broken hoe, the wooden handle splintered and the iron blade bent at an impossible angle. You nod, wiping a hand on your apron. You know this dance. He'll want it fixed quickly, and he'll have very little to pay, but he's your neighbour, and his crops are his life. You have no choice but to take on the work, another small piece of your soul dedicated to the service of others. You put down the piece of iron you were working on and reach for the hoe. The clang of the hammer will begin again soon enough. You toss the broken hoe onto your workbench, the wood splintering further with the impact. The farmer watches, his eyes wide with a mixture of hope and anxiety. You can read his face. He's worried you'll refuse, or that you'll charge too much. But you can't refuse, not only because you need the work, but because you know a broken hoe means his livelihood is on the line. He probably spent what little he had on this tool in the first place, and now it's your job to make it whole again. You turn to the pile of raw materials in the corner of your hut, a small, sad collection of iron you've managed to acquire. This is the heart of your business, and it's a constant, tiresome struggle to keep it full. Sourcing iron isn't as simple as going to a mine and picking it up. First, you need to find a merchant who has some, and they're almost always from far away, from a town where they have access to a smelter. That merchant will charge you a fortune for a few lumps of ore, a price that feels like a dagger in your gut every time you have to pay it. The quality is a toss-up. 2. You might get a good, clean piece of wrought iron. Or you might get a lump of impure bog iron, riddled with slag and impurities that will make it nearly impossible to work with. There's no quality control, just a hopeful, prayerful purchase. A quirky historical fact is that in some parts of medieval Europe, iron ore was mined by simply scooping up iron-rich mud from the bottom of bogs and swamps. This bog iron was often the only source available to local smiths, and it was notoriously difficult to work. It would often contain bits of plant matter and other impurities, making for a weaker, more brittle product. You, in your current situation, would probably be all too familiar with the feeling of a piece of bog iron cracking under your hammer, a sound that is both frustrating and financially painful. Every time it happens, you feel a piece of your slim profit margin disappear. The financial drain is relentless. The raw materials are a massive, upfront cost that you might not be able to recoup for weeks or even months. As you wait for the farmer to pay you back in labor or produce, you're always one bad purchase away from being out of business. You're not just a craftsman, you're a shrewd, anxious businessman, constantly balancing your slim resources against the endless needs of the village. The idea of saving up enough to buy a large, high-quality stock is a beautiful fantasy that you entertain on the rare occasions you have a moment to yourself. Historians still argue whether the high cost of raw iron was a deliberate control mechanism by noblemen and merchants, or simply a reflection of the difficult and energy-intensive process of smelting and transporting the metal. You, however, don't care about the academic debate. You only care that you have to pay a small fortune to a traveling merchant for a chunk of metal that might not be worth the trouble. Your relationship with the merchant is a delicate dance of haggling and pleading. You try to convince him that you're a good, reliable customer, while he tries to squeeze every last copper coin from your worn leather pouch. You know that if you don't buy from him, you'll have to wait until the next one comes along, and you can't afford to wait. The village needs you, and you need the iron. You've learned to be frugal, to save every single scrap of metal. The floor of your hut is littered with bits and pieces of old horseshoes, broken nails, and discarded tools. These aren't just trash, they're your emergency supply. You can melt them down and rework them into something new. A process that is often more difficult than working with new iron but is a necessity. This is your version of recycling, a hard-won lesson in making do with what you have. It's a dirty, unglamorous, and often dangerous process, but it's the only thing that keeps you afloat. You look at the broken hoe again. Its useless blade a symbol of your unending struggle. You'll need to heat it, hammer it back into shape, and then re-temper the steel. The work is difficult, and the pay will be minimal. But it's the cost of doing business in a world where everyone is just trying to get by. You grab the first of your tools, a pair of crude tongs, and you get to work. The farmer's anxious eyes watching your every move. The rhythmic clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a familiar song of survival. The iron you're working on is cold, useless. It won't bend to your will without immense heat. And that heat comes at a cost, a very real, very physical price. That price is charcoal. You look at the pile of black, brittle lumps in the corner of your workshop, the fuel for your fiery master. This isn't just wood you've chopped up and thrown in the fire, this is charcoal, a much hotter, more efficient fuel, and making it is a back-breaking and thankless job that often falls to you or your family during the winter months when there is no smithing work. The process is long and exhausting. You have to find a good source of hardwood, something dense like oak or beech. You fell the trees. A physically draining task with a crude, heavy axe. Then you have to cut the wood into manageable lengths. The work leaves your arms aching, and your back screaming in protest. Once you have a pile of wood, you have to create a charcoal kiln. This is an art in itself. You arrange the wood in a tightly packed mound, often in a conical shape, and then you cover it with a layer of earth and turf, leaving small vents at the bottom and a chimney at the top. The idea is to burn the wood very slowly in a low-oxygen environment, so that it carbonizes instead of turning to ash. It's a tricky balance to strike. Too much air, and the whole thing goes up in flames. Too little, and it just smolders and goes out. The kiln needs to be watched constantly, for days, sometimes even a week. You and your family take shifts, sitting in the cold, damp woods, watching the rising smoke. You're always on alert, ready to plug a hole if you see too much smoke escaping. It's an exercise in patience and vigilance, and it's a miserable, isolating experience. There are no cozy cottages for you, no warm fires and soft beds, just the cold ground and the smell of smouldering wood. You remember one time, the kiln didn't work, the wood just smouldered, and you ended up with a pile of useless, half-burned logs. It was a huge setback, a week of wasted labour, and it left you with nothing to fuel your forge. That was a hungry winter for your family. A quirky fact is that some medieval blacksmiths would make a pact with a charcoal burner who specialised in the trade. These burners were often seen as reclusive hermits, living deep in the woods, and they were the subject of many folk tales and superstitions. But for most village smiths, this was a luxury you couldn't afford. You had to be the charcoal burner yourself, a master of a second, equally difficult craft. You're not just a man of iron and fire, you're a woodsman, a labourer, and a kiln master. Historians still argue whether the skill of charcoal making was passed down through apprenticeships or learned through painful trial and error. For you, it was mostly the latter. You learned from your father, who learned from his, but the subtle nuances, the feel of the mound, the smell of the smoke, those were lessons only experience could teach. You've had your share of painful failures, and each one was a lesson paid for in blood, sweat, and lost time. The end result, a pile of black, lightweight charcoal, looks unimpressive, but you know its true value. Each lump is a piece of the forest, and a piece of your own life force, transformed by your labour into the very thing that gives your work power. As you toss a few handfuls of charcoal into the forge, the heat flares, and the white-hot iron begins to soften. You can feel the new, vibrant heat, and you know this is what will allow you to do your work. The farmer is watching you, his face a mix of awe and impatience. He has no idea of the journey that pile of charcoal took to get here. He doesn't know about the cold nights in the woods, the smoky smell that never leaves your clothes, or the deep, grinding weariness that comes from tending a slow-burning fire. He just sees the results. He sees the hot iron and the promise of a fixed hoe, and that, you realize, is all that really matters. You grab your hammer, a new sense of purpose in your weary muscles, and the song of survival begins again. The farmer leaves with his newly mended hoe, his silent nod of thanks feeling like a heavy weight in your hand as he drops a few meagre coins into it. The clang of your hammer fades into a low hum as you lean against the workbench, your body screaming for a rest it will not receive. You glance over at the corner of your small hut, the place where you and your family sleep. It's not a separate room. It's just a corner, a slightly less smoky patch of the same dirt floor where you work. The air is always thick with the smell of smoke, and a fine layer of soot covers every surface. From your worn-out bedrolls to the single wooden table where you eat your meals, your home is your business, and your business is your home. There's no escaping it. You wake up to the smell of your forge and you go to sleep to the lingering warmth of its embers. This lack of a clear separation means you are never truly off the clock. A customer could arrive at any time. A piece of iron could need mending in the middle of the night, and you are expected to be available. There's no refuge from the dirt and the noise. Your wife has long since given up trying to keep the place clean. The soot gets into everything, staining clothes, clinging to hair, and settling in the creases of your skin. The floor is a constant source of discomfort, a cold, hard pack of earth that never seems to dry out, and you track it everywhere. A grim reminder of your profession. A mainstream historical fact is that in medieval Europe, it was common for artisans and tradesmen to live and work in the same structure. The concept of a separate home and workplace is a relatively modern one for you. This means your children grow up knowing the rhythm of the bellows and the sound of the hammer as the background music to their lives. They are born into the trade, and they will likely never know another life. It's a closed-in, claustrophobic existence, with your world extending only as far as your village and your hut. Historians still argue whether this close-knit living arrangement fostered a stronger sense of family and community, or if it was a source of constant stress and illness due to the lack of sanitation and privacy. You've experienced both. The family is always there, always a part of the work, but there's a certain loneliness that comes with never truly being able to escape the demands of your profession. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some wealthy blacksmiths would have their forges built as a separate outbuilding, a rare sign of prosperity that meant they could come and go from their work. This was the ultimate luxury. The ability to close the door on the day's toil and have a space that was truly your own. But for you, the door opens into the main hut, and you're always just a step away from your forge, a constant, low-level dread clinging to you. The lack of sanitation is a silent killer. There's no well inside, so you have to walk to the village pump for all your water. There's no place to relieve yourself except a crude outhouse behind the hut. The waste and animal offal from the animals you might be shoeing are a constant source of foul odours and, more dangerously, disease. Your family lives in a miasma of dirt and grime, and you know, deep down, that this is the real danger of your profession. It's not the fire, it's not the flying slag, it's the slow, steady grind of sickness and filth. You're always a little bit sick, always a little bit run down. And you know it's because of the conditions you are forced to live in. You look around at the small, smoky world you've built. It's a testament to your hard work, but also a cage. You are a prisoner in your own workshop, a vital part of the community that is nevertheless relegated to the outskirts. A dirty, necessary tradesman who smells of smoke and metal. You sigh, the sound a soft, tired puff of breath in the still, heavy air. The hammer will have to wait, just for a moment. You close your eyes, the image of your firelit forge seared into your mind's eye. You close your eyes for a brief moment, the lingering ache in your muscles a constant reminder of the physical cost of your trade. But it's not just the physical wear and tear that gets to you, it's the unseen enemies. The air in your hut is a cocktail of dangers, the smoke from the burning charcoal, the fine iron dust that gets kicked up with every hammer blow, and the fumes from heating different metals all hang heavy in the air. This toxic mix settles in your lungs, a constant, low-level poison that you inhale with every breath. You're always coughing. It's a deep, rattling cough that starts in the morning and follows you throughout the day. It's a sound that has become as familiar as the clang of your hammer. You watch your children playing nearby, their faces smudged with soot, and you worry. They're breathing the same air. You've seen other smiths grow pale and weak, their chests rattling with every breath, and you know that's the slow, inevitable path you're on. A simple cough can turn into a debilitating illness, and there is no one to help you. The village wise woman might have a poultice or a tea, but she's not a physician, and you know, deep down, that a serious respiratory infection would be the end of you. A mainstream historical fact is that consumption, a term for what we now know as tuberculosis, was a leading cause of death in medieval times, and tradesmen like blacksmiths were particularly susceptible due to their working conditions. The constant exposure to dust and smoke made their lungs weak and vulnerable. You are a living example of this reality. You can feel the tightness in your chest, the way your lungs struggle to draw in a full breath after a hard day's work. It's a silent, invisible battle, and you know you're losing. Historians still argue whether medieval people understood the link between their working conditions and the illnesses that plagued them, or if they just accepted it as an unfortunate part of life. You probably don't have a clear answer to that. You just know that a man who works the land gets tired from the sun, but a man who works the forge gets sick from the air. A quirky tidbit you might have heard from a travelling merchant is that in some distant lands, blacksmiths would chew on certain herbs to cleanse their lungs. You've never tried it, but the idea is a comforting, if useless, fantasy. And it's not just the air. The lack of sanitation in and around your hut means that any minor cut or burn could turn into a life-threatening infection. A simple prick from a piece of metal, a scrape from a rough tool, and you could be dead in a week. Your hands are a map of past injuries, each scar a story of a close call. You know to be careful, but you also know that accidents are inevitable. The risk is a constant, low-level buzz in your mind, a quiet dread that never fully goes away. You are a necessary part of the village, a vital link in the chain of survival, but you are also an outcast, a dirty, sick man who lives on the fringes. The other villagers might respect your skills, but they don't envy your life. They see the toll your work takes on you, the constant cough, the pale face, and the perpetually tired eyes. They know you're a ticking clock, a man who will burn out long before his time. You stand up, a familiar groan escaping your lips. The rest has been long enough. A new customer is waiting. A woman with a broken spindle. She looks at you with a mixture of respect and pity. You see it in her eyes, that fleeting glimpse of sympathy. You wish she would just look at the work, not the man, but you know that's impossible. Your work is you, your dirt, your smoke, your sickness. It's all a part of the trade. You grab a new piece of iron and lay it on the anvil. The first hammer blow is a bit weak, and you can feel the protest of your lungs as you swing. The day has only just begun. The woman with the broken spindle hands you a small, half-eaten loaf of dark bread as payment, her expression a mix of gratitude and apology. It's not much, but it's something. You take it with a nod, your stomach rumbling in protest. The reality of your diet is as bleak as your workshop. There is no variety, no richness, just a constant, monotonous struggle to get enough calories to fuel your back-breaking work. Your typical meal, if you're lucky, is a thick, watery pottage made of whatever grains the village has to spare. Oats, barley, or maybe rye. It's often spiced with a few wild herbs you've foraged, but it's mostly just a bland, gritty mush. You eat this pottage with the same grim determination with which you swing your hammer. It's not for pleasure, it's for survival. The bread, if you get it, is dark and hard. A dense loaf that has to be torn apart with strong, calloused hands. It's nothing like the fluffy, white bread of the nobility. That's a luxury you'll never taste. Meat is a fantasy, a rare and precious treat reserved for special occasions like a village feast or a particularly generous payment from a wealthy lord. You'll eat salted pork fat if you can get it, a precious source of calories. But even that is a luxury. A mainstream historical fact is that the diet of medieval peasants and labourers was overwhelmingly plant-based, with meat being a rare commodity reserved for the wealthy or special occasions. This was not a choice, but a necessity born of poverty and the difficulty of raising and preserving livestock. For you, this means a constant, low-level hunger. You are always in need of more food, more calories, more of the raw fuel that your body burns through with every hammer blow. Your body is a machine, and you're feeding it just enough to keep it from breaking down completely. Historians still argue whether the lack of protein and fat in the common diet of the time was the primary reason for a shorter life expectancy. You, however, can feel the truth of it in your own bones. You are tired, not just from the work, but from a persistent, deep-seated lack of nourishment. A quirky tidbit to supplement their diet. Some medieval blacksmiths were known to occasionally consume the blood of animals they were shoeing, a practice believed to give them extra strength. You've never done it, but you understand the desperation that would lead to such an act. You'll settle for the dark bread, though a part of you wishes it was a nice, thick piece of beef. Your wife and children eat the same meal, the same monotonous pottage. You can see the effects of it on them, too. They are thin, their faces gaunt, their energy low. They need to eat to survive, to help with the chores and to gather the fuel. But the food is barely enough to keep them going. The reality of your life is that food is not a pleasure. It is a resource, and a scarce one at that. You are a man who transforms iron, but you can't transform a handful of grain into a feast. The lack of proper nutrition makes you more susceptible to sickness, more vulnerable to infection, and less able to recover from the endless aches and pains of your work. You are in a constant state of mild deficiency, a slow, grinding decline that you can't stop. You look at the dark bread in your hand, a small, hard thing that represents your entire lunch. It's a humbling reminder of your place in the world, a dirty tradesman who works with fire and metal but can't even afford a proper meal. You bite into it, the taste of dry grain and a faint bitterness filling your mouth. It's not delicious, but it's a taste of survival. You finish the dark bread, feeling the gritty texture and its meagre sustenance settle in your stomach. The woman has long since left, and you are alone once more. The only sounds the crackling of the fire and the low, steady thrum of your own exhaustion. Your value to the village, you know, is immense. Without you, there would be no new tools, no mended ploughs, no horseshoes for the Lord's prized stallion. You are a vital link in the chain of survival, a fundamental part of the community's existence. Yet, this value is rarely acknowledged with anything more than a grudging nod or a few handfuls of grain. You are a labourer, a tradesman, a dirty man who works with fire and grime. That in the eyes of many, is all you'll ever be. The priest, the lord, and even the wealthy merchant from the city all look down on you. They see the soot on your hands, the smoke in your clothes, and they judge you. The romantic notion of a blacksmith as a powerful, respected figure is just a story told around a fire you did not build. In reality, you are just a tool yourself, an implement used by others to get what they need. Your skills are sought after, but you, the man, are not. A mainstream historical fact is that in the medieval social hierarchy, manual labourers, and especially those who worked with fire and dirt, often occupied a lower social standing than farmers or craftsmen who worked with cleaner materials like wood or clay. This was a direct result of the perceived uncleanliness of the trade. You can feel this every day. The other villagers keep a respectful distance, not out of awe, but out of a subtle, unspoken judgment. The children are fascinated by your work, of course, but their parents pull them away before they can get too close. Historians still argue whether this social stigma was a holdover from ancient superstitions about smiths' magical powers, or if it was simply a class-based hierarchy that saw physical labor as a low-status occupation. You don't know the answer, and you don't care to. You just know that a farmer who toils in the dirt is seen as closer to God, while you, a man who toils in fire and smoke, are seen as closer to the devil. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval charters and documents refer to blacksmiths by names that literally translate to dirty worker or sooty hand, a testament to the low esteem in which they were held. But your pride, what little you have left, comes not from the respect of others, but from the quality of your work. You know that a well-made hoe will last for years, a testament to your skill. You know that the nails you hammer out will hold a building together long after you are gone. Your work is a tangible legacy, a piece of you that will live on. It's not a beautiful painting or a grand sculpture, but it is real, it is useful, and it is honest. You are not a great man, but you are a good craftsman, and that is a small comfort in a life full of discomfort. You grab a new piece of raw iron, the cold metal a shock to your warm, calloused hands. A young boy from the village, maybe 10 years old, peers into your hut, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. He's probably been sent to get a nail or a piece of wire for his father. You nod at him, a silent invitation to come in. He hesitates for a moment, then steps inside, his gaze fixed on the glowing embers of your forge. He's not here to judge you, he's just here to see the fire, to see the magic. You offer him a small, chipped piece of metal, a tiny, worthless scrap. He takes it with a look of pure awe, and for a moment, you feel a flicker of pride. You might not be respected, but you are a part of their world, a vital part. The clang of the hammer begins again, a sound that is both a curse and a blessing. The young boy scurries off, clutching the piece of scrap iron as if it were a treasure. You turn your attention back to your anvil, the low hum of the forge your only company. But you are never truly alone. The village is a small, gossipy place, and your business is a part of its fabric, a vital, if grimy, thread. And where there is business, there is competition. In a community this size, you are not the only one who can hammer iron. There are others, and they are your rivals. You have to constantly worry about who is getting what work. Is the new lord's armourer a rival from a different village, or is he one of your own? Is the farmer down the lane giving his business to you or to the smith on the other side of the stream? You hear the rumours, the whispers. Old Eric's ploughshare broke again. He's taking it to the smith in the next town. Every lost job is a blow to your meagre income and a jab at your pride. You are in a perpetual state of quiet rivalry, a contest for a few coppers and a handful of oats. A mainstream historical fact is that in medieval towns and cities, craftsmen of the same trade often formed guilds. These guilds were a complex mix of mutual support and fierce control. They set prices, established standards for quality, and protected their members from outside competition. You, in your small, rural village, are part of a more informal, but no less intense, guild. You and the other smiths know each other. You might share a drink at the tavern on a rare occasion. But attention always lingers beneath the surface. your allies against the world, but rivals for a living. Historians still argue whether guilds, with their strict rules and high initiation fees, were more of a benefit or a hindrance to a tradesman. On one hand, they offered a kind of protection and a safety net. On the other, they stifled innovation and made it nearly impossible for a newcomer to break into the business. You, however, are a part of a more primitive system. Your guild is a silent agreement not to undercut each other too badly, a fragile truce that can be broken at any time by the promise of a more lucrative job. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some guilds had very specific rules about what a member could and couldn't forge. A bladesmith could not make horseshoes, for example, and a farrier couldn't make tools. This level of specialization, however, was a luxury of the big city, and you, in your village, have to be a jack of all trades. You are a bladesmith, a farrier, a toolmaker, and a tinker, all rolled into one. You are a one-man guild, and you are always on your guard. You might be asked to fix a tool that was made by another smith, and you'll have to make a choice. Do you point out the flaws in his work to make your own look better? Or do you just fix the tool and keep your mouth shut to maintain the fragile peace? It's a constant calculation, a social minefield you have to navigate every day. The work is hard enough without having to worry about the politics, but here you are, a labourer and a diplomat, a man of fire and a man of caution. The work is never just the work, it's always personal. You grab a new piece of iron. The heat of the forge a welcome distraction from the weight of your worries. The rhythmic clang of your hammer is a statement, a testament to your own skill and a declaration that you are still here, still working, still fighting for your place in the world. The sound echoes through the village, and you know the other smiths hear it. They know you are working, just as you know they are. It's a silent conversation, a negotiation of territory and trade that is as old as the hills themselves. The clang of your hammer on the anvil is a loud, confident sound, but it masks a deep and constant anxiety. You're never really sure where your next meal is coming from. The farmer's few coins and the baker's dark bread are a small victory, but they're not enough to live on for long. Your livelihood is a precarious dance, a perpetual balancing act on the edge of poverty. You might have a good week, a flurry of activity where a lord needs his horses reshod and a wealthy merchant wants a new set of hinges. You'll have a few extra coins in your pouch, and you'll dream of buying a whole haunch of pork for your family. But then, as quickly as it came, the work dries up. The rains come. The fields are too muddy for the plough, and the roads are impassable. The village hunkers down, and so do you. This is the cycle of your life, feast or famine. There are no savings, no rainy day funds. Every coin you earn is immediately spent on food, fuel, or the raw iron you need for the next job. You are always playing catch-up, always trying to get ahead, and always failing. The constant financial strain is a heavy weight on your shoulders, a pressure that is far more debilitating than the heaviest hammer you own. You know that one bad season, one long illness, and you and your family could be out on the streets, with no recourse. A mainstream historical fact is that a large percentage of the medieval population lived at or near the subsistence level. They were constantly vulnerable to crop failures, disease, and the whims of their lords. This meant that a tradesman like you, while technically a step above a peasant, was just as susceptible to financial ruin. Your small hut, your crude tools, and your meagre stock of iron are all the wealth you have, and you know they could all be taken from you in a moment. Historians still argue whether this precarious existence fostered a sense of community, where people relied on each other in times of need, or if it led to a more cutthroat, every man for himself mentality. You, however, know it's a bit of both. You'll help a neighbour in a pinch, but you also have to protect your own business. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval charters and laws had specific provisions for debtors' prisons, places where people who couldn't pay their debts would be held. The thought of being locked away, unable to work and unable to provide for your family, is a constant, quiet terror. You are a slave to the market, a man whose life is dictated by the needs of others. When a farmer needs a new ploughshare, you are in high demand. When the harvest is in and the tools are put away for the winter, you are a man without a purpose. The long winters are a time of deep anxiety. You'll spend the last of your money on food and fuel, and you'll pray that something, anything, will break and need your attention. You'll mend your own tools, you'll sharpen old knives, and you'll even create small trinkets out of scrap, hoping a child might want one. You are a man who works with fire and iron, but you are utterly powerless in the face of the elements and the economy. You look at the few coins in your pouch. It's enough for a small amount of charcoal, but not enough for the iron you need. The farmer's hoe is fixed, but you know there's another waiting, and the next one after that. You are a part of a never-ending cycle of need and want, a man who is always giving and never getting enough in return. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that is both a symbol of your work and a testament to your endless struggle. The coins in your pouch are a quiet, reassuring jingle, a promise of a small amount of charcoal and a few handfuls of grain, but that promise is a fleeting one. You've learned that for every new piece of work that comes in, there are a dozen broken ones that need your attention. You spend more time mending than you do creating. The farmer's hoe, the carpenter's axe, the village elder's cauldron, all of them come to you broken, bent, or dull. You are a doctor of damaged metal, a mechanic for a pre-industrial world, and your waiting room is always full. The constant need for repairs is both a blessing and a curse. It's a steady stream of income, a low but constant trickle of work that keeps your forge lit and your family fed. But it's also a monotonous, uninspiring grind. You rarely get to feel the thrill of creating something new, something beautiful. Instead, you are condemned to a life of fixing the old, a repetitive cycle of heating, hammering, and reforging the same worn-out tools. The work is physically demanding, but it's the mental toll that gets to you. The lack of creative freedom, the constant repetition, and the never-ending stream of broken things is soul-crushing. A mainstream historical fact is that a large part of a medieval blacksmith's work was indeed maintenance and repair, not the creation of new tools and weapons. While the romantic image of the smith is that of a great forger of swords, the reality was that they were the village's fix-it man. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval repair work was done with a crude form of welding, a process known as forge welding, where two pieces of metal were heated to a near-molten state and then hammered together. This was a difficult and often unreliable process, but it was the only option. It was far more common for you to simply re-temper the steel, a task that required a great deal of skill but offered little in the way of creative expression. Historians still argue whether the constant need for repair work was a result of poorly made tools or simply a reflection of the harsh realities of medieval life. You, however, know that it's both. The tools were crude and often broke under the immense pressure of daily use, but the constant need for repair also meant that people were not simply throwing things away, they were reusing, recycling, and getting every last bit of life out of their precious tools. You are a part of this cycle of resourcefulness, a vital cog in a system of conservation. You are a man who can breathe life back into a broken piece of iron. You are so good at this, in fact, that you're in a bit of a bind. If you make a tool that is too good, too durable, you'll put yourself out of business for a while. You'll have to wait until it breaks. It's a strange paradox. A craftsman who is punished for being too good at his job. You don't deliberately make a bad tool, of course, but you know that the occasional break, the occasional need for your skills, is what keeps you afloat. It's a cruel game, a delicate balance between quality and necessity. You look at a pile of broken tools in the corner of your workshop, a veritable graveyard of damaged iron, a ploughshare with a snapped point, a bent rake, a cracked hinge. You know each one of them has a story of hard work and a sudden, violent end. It's your job to take those stories and give them a new chapter, to take the broken pieces and make them whole again. You grab the bent rake, a mundane but vital piece of equipment. You throw it into the forge, the flames licking at the old, tired metal. The clang of the hammer begins again, a testament to your endless, uninspired work. The bent rake is now whole again, its tines straightened, its steel re-tempered. The work was routine, a familiar and uninspired process that you could do in your sleep. But even with a simple repair, there is a risk, a constant, low-level anxiety. What if a hidden crack in the metal widens? What if the re-tempered steel is too brittle and snaps the first time the farmer uses it in his field? A single mistake can haunt you for years. And in a small, gossipy village, your reputation is everything. You are not judged by the grandeur of your work, but by its durability and reliability. A farmer doesn't care if his ploughshare is beautiful. He cares if it will last. If it breaks, he'll tell his neighbours, and they'll tell their neighbours, and soon the whispers will spread like wildfire. Don't go to that smith, they'll say. His work doesn't last. In a world with no advertising and no customer reviews, your reputation is your only currency. You've seen other smiths go out of business, their forges growing cold because they lost the trust of the community. You are always one bad job away from being an outcast, a man whose skills are no longer needed. A mainstream historical fact is that in medieval society, a craftsman's reputation was crucial to their survival. With no formal contracts or legal recourse, a customer's word was your only form of advertising, and a bad reputation could lead to total financial ruin. You, a man who lives by the hammer, are utterly at the mercy of the words of others. Your work is a reflection of your worth, and if it fails, so do you. Historians still argue whether this reputation-based economy fostered higher quality craftsmanship, or if it led to a conservative, uninspired style of work where tradesmen were afraid to innovate for fear of failure. You, however, know that it's a constant pressure to conform, to do the work that is expected of you in the way it has always been done. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval guilds had a masterpiece requirement for apprentices to become masters. This was not a work of art, but a functional piece of work that had to pass inspection, a final test of a smith's reputation. You, in your small village, have no formal test. Your test is every single day, every single job, and the judgment of your neighbours. You look at the newly mended rake, the black, re-tempered steel gleaming in the dim light of your hut. It looks good, it feels strong, but you can't be sure. You hand it back to the farmer who came to pick it up, his face a mix of hope and anxiety. He doesn't say anything, just examines it carefully, running a calloused thumb over the mended tines. He gives a slow, careful nod, and a few coins change hands. He doesn't say thank you, and he doesn't need to. That nod, that simple act of approval, is all you need. For now, your reputation is intact. You sigh, a long, quiet breath that feels like a weight being lifted from your shoulders, but the relief is fleeting. There are a half-dozen other jobs waiting, a pile of broken tools in the corner of your hut, and a constant, quiet dread in the back of your mind. A farmer's hoe breaks in the field. A horseshoe is lost on the road. A hinge on a door suddenly gives out, each one a test of your skills, a gamble with your reputation, a constant reminder that you are only as good as your last job. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that is both a statement of your skill and a testament to your endless anxiety. The farmer is gone, his footsteps fading into the dusty lane, and you are left with the silence and the constant, thrumming anxiety. You wipe a grimy hand across your brow, feeling the fine layer of soot and sweat. The image of a blacksmith, a powerful, muscular man with a thunderous hammer, is a lie. It's a story told by poets and bards who have never felt the searing heat on their face or the deep, bone-weary ache in their muscles. That heroic figure is a cruel joke, a beautiful fantasy that makes the reality of your life all the more brutal. You are not a hero, you are a labourer. Your work is not about glory, it's about survival. The weapons you forge are not for honour, they are for killing. The tools you create are not for art, they are for work. You are a vital part of the war machine, a necessary cog in the wheel of a grim, violent world, and you are not celebrated for it. The knight in his shining armour is the hero, and you are the dirty man who made his sword. He gets the songs and the glory, and you get a few meagre coins and the constant fear of a lost reputation. A mainstream historical fact is that the romantic image of the blacksmith as a heroic figure often associated with powerful gods like Thor or the Greek god Hephaestus, is largely a modern invention in medieval society. While the smith was a vital member of the community, they were often seen as a lower-class labourer, their trade associated with the dirt and the smoke of the forge. This was a far cry from the godlike status they held in ancient myths. You are not a god, you are just a man with a hammer, and the world is far more indifferent than the old stories would have you believe. Historians still argue whether the heroic image of the blacksmith was a deliberate attempt to elevate the trade, or if it was simply a natural byproduct of the mystery and danger of the work. You, however, know that the only thing magical about your work is the way a piece of cold, lifeless iron can be transformed into a useful tool. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval folktales would depict blacksmiths as being in league with the devil, their ability to work with fire and metal seen as a kind of black magic. You're not in league with the devil, but you are a man who is always a little bit too close to the flame. You look around your small, cramped hut, the firelight catching the grimy tools and the worn-out bellows. This is your kingdom, a small, smoky world of your own making. But it's not a kingdom of glory, it's a kingdom of hard work and quiet desperation. You've seen knights in shining armour come to you, their faces clean, their hands soft. They look at you with a kind of detached curiosity, as if you are some kind of exotic animal. They don't see the pain in your eyes, the constant ache in your hands, or the weight of 100 broken tools on your shoulders. They just see the finished product, the sword, the horseshoe, the armour. They don't see you. The man. You are a man of the earth and the fire, a man who knows the true weight of a hammer and the true cost of a pound of iron. You are a man who works with his hands, and you have no time for the romantic lies of a world that does not understand you. You grab a new piece of raw iron, the cold metal a welcome reality check. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that is both a testament to your quiet strength and a rebuke to the heroic lies of the outside world. The hammer is heavy in your hand, a familiar, comforting weight. You look at the pile of bent iron and broken tools that still need mending, and you feel the familiar dread. But you're not entirely alone in this. Your apprentice, a boy maybe a bit older than the one who came for the scrap iron, is your shadow. He's a clumsy, gangly thing, a constant source of both frustration and a tiny flicker of hope. He's your future, and he's also a pain in your aching back. His name is Thomas, and he's been with you for a year. His parents having paid a small fee and promising a few years of his labour in exchange for you teaching him the trade. He's not a genius. He's a boy. He drops things. He misjudges a hammer blow, sending sparks flying in a dangerous arc. He's more of a hindrance than a help, at least for now. You have to constantly watch him, to yell at him to keep his hands away from the hot metal, to show him for the 10th time how to properly use the bellows. It's a second job. Teaching a child a trade that has already taken so much from you. A mainstream historical fact is that apprenticeships were a formal and essential part of the medieval economic system. They were a way for a master craftsman to pass on his knowledge and for a young person to learn a trade without having to pay for formal schooling. For you, it's a way to get a bit of extra help and a way to ensure that your skills won't die with you. But it's also a constant responsibility, a burden that weighs on you in a way that is different from the physical labour. You are responsible for this child's future, and a part of you worries that you're just teaching him how to die a bit more slowly. Historians still argue whether the system of apprenticeship was an equitable arrangement for the apprentice, or if it was a form of exploitation. You, however, know that it's a bit of both. You feed him, you house him, in your hut, of course, and you teach him a valuable skill, but you also work him relentlessly, and you know, in your heart, that he'll never get rich from this trade. A quirky tidbit, some medieval apprenticeship contracts included specific clauses about what an apprentice could and could not eat, with some masters promising a meat 3 times a week clause as a sign of their generosity. You've never been able to promise that. Your apprentice eats the same monotonous pottage as the rest of your family, and he's lucky to get that. Thomas is watching you now, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe as you expertly draw out a piece of iron into a long, thin rod. You are a master of your craft, and he is a clumsy student. Yeah, but you were a clumsy student once, too. You remember the burns, the smashed fingers, and the frustration of not being able to make the metal do what you wanted it to do. You see yourself in him, a younger, less scarred version of the man you've become, and you feel a small, unexpected surge of pity. You're not just his master, you're his teacher, his mentor, and his only hope of a future. You hand him a small hammer, a lighter one you use for finishing work. "Try it," you say, your voice gruff with exhaustion but a bit softer than usual. He takes it, his hands clumsy but willing. He places the hammer against the iron, and you guide his hand, showing him the proper angle, the right amount of force. The first blow is weak, the second a bit better, and the third is a genuine, satisfying clang. He looks at you, a triumphant smile on his soot-smudged face, and you feel a flicker of pride. You are not a hero, but you are a teacher, and that is a kind of legacy all its own. Thomas, your apprentice, grins, a rare and genuine expression that momentarily lights up his soot-streaked face. You nod in approval, the quiet satisfaction a small warmth in your chest. But that feeling is fleeting. You look from him to the back of the hut, where your wife is tending a small, simmering pot over a low fire. Your family is a part of this, a vital, if silent, part of your business. There is no separation. Your work is their life, your wife. Ilara is not just a housewife. She is the business manager, the head of the household, and a partner in a struggle. She handles the accounts, keeping track of who owes what, a few eggs here, a bushel of grain there. She takes care of the children, making sure they are as clean as they can be in a hut perpetually coated in grime. She is the quiet force that holds everything together, the unseen hand that keeps your world from collapsing. She knows the rhythm of your work, the low days and the good ones, and she plans accordingly. When you get a rare, big job, she is the one who will decide what to do with the money, whether to buy a new piece of cloth for a tunic or to get a small amount of salt pork for a feast. She is a full partner in this, a part of the dirt and the smoke as much as you are. A mainstream historical fact is that in medieval society, particularly in artisan households, the wife was often a crucial partner in the family business. She would manage the finances, deal with customers, and even assist with the work itself. This was not a side job, it was a full, integrated part of a woman's role. You can see this in your own life. Ilara is the face of your business when you're too busy or too tired to talk to a customer. She is the one who will haggle for a better price for your raw materials, her voice a soft but firm counterpoint to your own gruff, exhausted tone. She is a diplomat and a manager, and you would be utterly lost without her. Historians still argue whether this partnership in work and life led to a more equitable relationship between husband and wife, or if it was simply a necessity born of a difficult existence. You don't have time to ponder such things. You just know that you and Ilara are a team, a small, weary army fighting for your survival. A quirky tidbit you'll remember is that some guilds, particularly those in textile and brewing, were dominated by women, and that wives and daughters of blacksmiths would often learn the basic skills of the trade. Ilara, in a quiet moment, has even learned to use the bellows, and she knows how to temper a piece of steel well enough to save you a few minutes of work. She doesn't have the strength to use the heavy hammer, but she knows enough to be a vital second pair of hands. Your children, too, are a part of this. They are constantly in the hut, watching you work, their small hands helping to sort the scrap metal or to fetch a bucket of water from the well. They are growing up with the noise and the heat, and you worry about the toll it will take on their small bodies, but you have no choice. They are your family, and this is your life. There is no other way. You look at Thomas, his small, soot-smudged face still beaming with pride, and you see a bit of your own son in him. You are teaching him a trade, but you are also showing him how to live and how to survive. The clang of the hammer begins again, a testament to the endless cycle of your life. The work is hard, the pay is low, and the future is uncertain, but you are not alone. You have your family, your apprentice, and the quiet, steady strength of a wife who is a true partner in every sense of the word. The rhythmic clang, clang, clang fills the air, and for a moment, you feel a sense of purpose. You are not just a laborer, you are a provider, a teacher, and the head of a small, grimy, but loving family. You are a creature of habit, a man whose life is defined by a series of repetitive, physically demanding tasks. But even within the monotony, there are moments of challenge, jobs that require a different kind of skill, a different kind of focus. The farmer's hoe, the bent rake, the loose nail, these are the bread and butter of your trade. But sometimes, a customer comes to you with a request for something special, something intricate, a lock for a chest, a new set of hinges for a heavy door, or a key for a small box. These are the jobs that require not just brute strength, but a delicate touch and a keen eye. You look at a piece of cold iron, and your mind is already at work, not just imagining the finished product, but the dozens of tiny, precise steps it will take to get there. You'll need to use a smaller hammer, a finer chisel, and a great deal of patience. The process is a slow and meticulous one, a stark contrast to the quick, violent blows you use to forge a plowshare. You are no longer a brawler. You are a surgeon, a man who works with a hammer and anvil, but with a jeweler's precision. The heat is less, the sound is a more delicate tink, 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 and the stakes are just as high. A single mistake, a misplaced blow, and the entire piece is ruined. The metal is unforgiving, and a tiny error can make a lock useless or a key unworkable. A mainstream historical fact is that locksmithing was a highly specialized and respected trade in the Middle Ages. The ability to create a secure lock was a sign of great skill, and the best locksmiths were often employed by lords and kings to protect their valuables. You are a village smith, a generalist, but you've had to learn the basics of this trade to survive. It's a part of the constant pressure to be everything to everyone. You've had to teach yourself, a slow and painful process of trial and error, a series of failed attempts and ruined pieces of iron. Historians still argue whether the secrets of locksmithing were closely guarded trade secrets or if they were passed down through apprenticeships. You, however, know that the only secret is practice, and more practice, and the willingness to learn from your mistakes. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval locks were so complex they were more like puzzles than simple mechanisms. Some were even made to look like animals or mythical creatures, a testament to the artistry of the smith. You, in your small hut, are not making works of art. You are making simple, functional locks that will keep a chest secure from a casual thief. The danger of this work is a different kind of danger. It's not the flying slag or the searing heat. It's the small, precise movements that can lead to a slip of the chisel, a deep cut that could fester and become infected. It's the tiny, sharp pieces of metal that can fly into your eyes, leaving you blind. You work with a quiet intensity, your brow furrowed in concentration. The silence in the hut is a palpable thing, a stark contrast to the normal clang and clatter. Thomas, your apprentice, watches you, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. This is the part of the trade he hasn't seen yet, the part that requires a different kind of strength, a strength of will and a patience of mind. You are not just a man with a hammer, you are a man of 100 different skills, 1,000 different small dangers. You finish the key, the small, intricate piece of iron, a testament to your quiet skill. You hand it to the customer, a small, nervous man who looks like he's hiding something important. He takes it with a look of immense relief. He doesn't say thank you, but he doesn't need to. The look on his face, the weight of the new key in his hand, is all the payment you need. You turn back to your anvil, the rhythmic clang of the hammer about to begin again. The mundane work is a comfort, a welcome return to a world of simple problems and simple solutions. The rhythmic tink, tink, tink of your small hammer on the intricate key is a brief respite, a moment of focus and quiet. But the moment is over, and you're back to the back-breaking grind. You grab the heavy sledgehammer, a tool for the larger, more brutal jobs. A new customer, a farmer you've seen before, stands at the entrance of your hut, a large, heavy log chain draped over his shoulder. It's broken in the middle, a crucial link having snapped under immense pressure. This is the work that truly tests your body, the work that turns your sinew and bone into a constant, thrumming ache. The log chain is heavy, and you have to lift it, position it, and hold it in place while you work. The heat from the fire, the constant hammering, the sheer physical exertion, it all takes a toll. Your shoulders are perpetually sore, your lower back a constant, dull throb. Your hands, calloused and thick, are a testament to the endless, repetitive stress of your trade. Every time you swing the hammer, the vibrations travel up your arm, rattling your bones and leaving a residual ache that never fully goes away. You're not just building things, you're slowly and methodically destroying your own body. A mainstream historical fact is that repetitive strain injuries, or RSIs, were a common ailment among medieval labourers. The constant hammering, lifting, and bending without modern ergonomic tools or brakes led to chronic pain and debilitating conditions. You are a living testament to this. Your knees ache, your elbows are stiff, and your fingers are gnarled and thick. This isn't a job you can do well into your old age. You know, deep down, that there will come a day when your body simply gives out, and you will be unable to work. This is the grim reality of your trade, the one that no one wants to talk about. Historians still argue whether medieval people understood the long-term effects of their physical labour on their bodies, or if they just accepted the pain as an unfortunate and inevitable part of life. You, however, know that the pain is a constant companion, a ghost that follows you from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval healers would recommend a mixture of herbs and hot water to soothe aching joints, a kind of primitive painkiller that probably had more of a placebo effect than anything else. You, however, just grit your teeth and keep working. You look at Thomas, your apprentice, a younger version of yourself. He's a bit clumsy with the hammer, a bit unsteady on his feet. You watch him, and a small part of you wants to tell him to run, to find another trade, something that won't ruin him in the long run. But you don't. You can't. This is your trade, and it's his only chance. He has to learn to endure the pain, to accept the slow, steady destruction of his body as the price of a living. You are a man of fire and iron, and you are also a man of pain. The two are intertwined, a constant and inseparable part of your life. The farmer watches you work, his face a mix of concern and impatience. He doesn't see the pain in your eyes, he just sees the man with the hammer, the man who is going to fix his broken chain. You lift the sledgehammer, its weight a familiar burden. The first blow is a solid clang, a sound that echoes through your entire body. You swing again, and again, the rhythmic sound of your labour filling the air. This is your life, a constant, low-level pain, and a constant, low-level dread. But for now, you just keep working. The farmer with the broken log chain is gone, his face a grim mask of exhaustion. You got the chain fixed, a small victory in a day of constant struggle. The coins he gave you are heavy in your hand, a meagre payment for your aching back, but the payment is secondary to the interaction itself. You've learned that your customers are not just people, they're a constant source of stress, a never-ending stream of demands and complaints. They come to you with their problems, their broken tools, their impossible deadlines, and you have to deal with them all. The demanding lord's man, who wants his new horseshoes made in a single day. The ungrateful peasant who thinks you've overcharged him for a simple repair. The merchant from the city who wants a specific kind of hinge and won't take no for an answer. You have to be a diplomat, a negotiator, and a therapist all rolled into one. You have to listen to their endless stories, their complaints about the weather, their arguments with their neighbours, and you have to do it all with a tired smile on your face. You can't afford to lose a customer, not when your livelihood hangs in the balance. A mainstream historical fact is that in medieval society, there was no customer service department. A craftsman's relationship with his clients was personal, direct, and often fraught with tension. You, the village blacksmith, are at the mercy of your customers' whims and moods. You have to navigate their social standing, their expectations, and their often unreasonable demands. There is no one to complain to, no one to back you up. You are a solitary figure in a world of complex and difficult social dynamics. Historians still argue whether this direct, personal relationship between craftsman and customer fostered a stronger sense of trust, or if it simply led to a series of difficult and awkward interactions. You, however, know it's a bit of both. You've had customers who have become friends, who have brought you food and drink and sat with you for hours. Their laughter a welcome sound in your smoky hut. But you've also had customers who have been rude, demanding, and utterly ungrateful. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval contracts for large jobs, like forging a gate or a set of armor, would include specific clauses about what would happen if the customer was dissatisfied, a kind of primitive insurance against a ruined reputation. You, however, have no contract. Your word is your bond, and your reputation is your only protection. You look at the pile of broken tools in the corner of your hut, a testament to the endless needs of the village: a farmer's ploughshare, a carpenter's axe, a housewife's broken spindle. Each one of them represents a person, a story, a potential headache. You are not just a man who works with iron, you are a man who works with people, and the people are often far more difficult to work with than the iron. The iron is hard, but it is predictable. The people are soft, but they are full of surprises. You grab a new piece of raw iron and place it in the forge. The heat a familiar comfort. The rhythmic clang, clang, clang of your hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that is both a symbol of your work and a kind of meditation, a way to shut out the endless noise of the world. For a few moments, it's just you and the iron, a simple, pure relationship that is far less complicated than the ones you have with your customers. You are a man who works with fire and iron, but you are also a man who works with people, and the people are often far more demanding than the metal. The farmer and his broken log chain are gone, and you are left in the relative silence of your hut. You look around, your eyes settling on a collection of strange and esoteric tools hanging on the sooty walls. These aren't the simple hammers and tongs of your daily work. They are specialized instruments, things you only use for the most unusual of jobs. You have a dozen different kinds of punches, from wide, flat ones for cutting sheet metal to tiny, needle-thin ones for delicate work. You have a set of small, finely toothed files for shaping intricate pieces and a series of crude dies for stamping simple patterns onto metal. These tools, like a surgeon's instruments, are for a specific purpose, and you've had to make most of them yourself. A laborious process of trial and error. You pick up one of them now, a strange-looking tool with a curved end and a sharp point. You can't remember the last time you used it. It's for making the small, intricate hinges for a heavy church door. A job you got once, a long time ago. The job paid well, but it was a long, painstaking process that nearly broke your back and your spirit. You had to work with a different kind of precision, a quiet, meticulous focus that was a stark contrast to the brutal, rhythmic clang of your usual work. You are not just a man of strength, you are a man of nuance, of 100 different small and unappreciated skills. A mainstream historical fact is that a medieval blacksmith's toolset was far more diverse and specialized than we often imagine. While the hammer and anvil were the staples, a master smith would have a wide array of punches, chisels, dies, and other tools for specific tasks like cutting, punching, or stamping. The ability to create and use these tools was a sign of a truly skilled craftsman. You, in your small hut, have had to become a master of all of them. Historians still argue whether the proliferation of specialized tools was a result of the demands of a more complex economy or simply a natural progression of the trade itself. You, however, know that it was a necessity. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some of the most bizarre medieval tools were used for creating specialized weaponry or armor. There were specific hammers for shaping a breastplate's curve, or a set of punches for creating the eyelets in chainmail. Each one designed for a single, unique task. You've never had a need for those, thank God, but you've seen them in the books of traveling merchants. Strange and menacing shapes that you wouldn't know how to use if you had to. You are a jack of all trades. A man who can fix a ploughshare one moment and create a delicate key the next. You are a repository of 1,000 different skills, a living encyclopedia of a forgotten world. You look at the pile of broken tools in the corner of your hut, and you think of the tools you will need to fix them. A heavy hammer for the ploughshare, a smaller one for the hinge, a chisel for a crack in an old axe head. Each tool is a part of the solution, a piece of a puzzle that you solve with your hands and your mind. The silence is broken by a low, insistent murmur from outside. A man is waiting. You can hear his heavy footsteps as he paces impatiently. You sigh. A long, weary breath. The world is full of broken things, and you are the one who is expected to fix them all. You grab the first of your many hammers, a familiar weight in your hand, and you prepare for the next problem. You are a man of fire and iron, a man of simple tools and complex solutions, and the work, as always, is never ending. The man with the broken chain is gone, and you're alone again. The only sound's the crackle of the fire and the faint ringing in your ears. You lean against your workbench, a wave of exhaustion washing over you. Your body is a machine, a tool for your work. But your mind is, well, your mind is just as tired. There is no escape from the manual labor. There is no time for thought, no time for learning, no time for anything but the next job. You are a man of the hammer, not the pen. You can't read or write. A common reality for a man of your station. The world of books and scholars is 1,000,000 miles away, a place you'll never see. Your day is a relentless cycle of physical exertion. You wake up, you light the fire, you hammer the iron, you mend the tools, and you fall into a fitful sleep. There is no time for intellectual stimulation. Your mind is always focused on the problem at hand, the angle of the hammer, the temperature of the iron, the weight of the tool. It's a kind of meditation, a quiet, focused attention that leaves no room for anything else. The thought of sitting down with a book, of listening to a scholar talk about the stars or a priest talk about the scriptures, is a beautiful fantasy, a luxury you can't afford. A mainstream historical fact is that literacy rates in medieval Europe were extremely low, particularly among the lower classes. Only a small percentage of the population, mostly priests, scribes, and the very wealthy, could read and write. For a tradesman like you, knowledge was passed down through a very different kind of tradition, a hands-on apprenticeship, not a textbook. Your education is in your calloused hands and your weary back. Historians still argue whether this lack of intellectual stimulation was a cause of or a result of the social hierarchy. Did the powerful keep knowledge from the poor to maintain control? Or did the demanding nature of physical labor leave no time for learning? You don't have the luxury of that debate. You just know that your days are filled with the clang of the hammer, not the turning of a page. A quirky tidbit you might have heard is that some master blacksmiths would use a system of unique markings on their tools, a kind of primitive language that only they and their apprentices could understand. It was a way of passing on secrets, a kind of knowledge that didn't require a book or a scholar. You are a repository of a different kind of knowledge, a knowledge of materials and fire and force. You know how to make a piece of iron strong, how to temper it just right so it won't break, and how to fix a tool that seems to be beyond repair. This is your genius, and it's a quiet, unappreciated one. You don't get a medal for it, and you don't get a song sung in your honor. You get a few coins and a quiet, weary satisfaction. You look at Thomas, your apprentice, a younger version of yourself. He doesn't know how to read, either. He's learning the language of the hammer and the anvil, the language that will sustain him for the rest of his life. You are a teacher, but you are not teaching him about the stars. You are teaching him how to survive, and in your world, that is a far more important lesson. The quiet of your hut is broken by a new arrival, a man with a broken plowshare. You sigh, a long, tired breath. The moment of rest is over. The endless cycle of work begins again. The man with the broken plowshare is gone, the object of his worry now sitting on your workbench, waiting its turn. You stand there for a moment, in the relative quiet of the hut, but you are not really alone. The noise is always with you, a constant, low-level buzz that has become a part of your existence. The clang of the hammer on the anvil is the most obvious, a loud, jarring clang that can rattle your teeth. But it's not the only noise. There is the hiss of the water as you plunge a hot piece of iron into the bucket. There is the roar of the fire as the bellows pump air into its heart. There is the scraping of a file against a rough piece of metal, the soft thump of a sledgehammer hitting the floor, the groan of your own body. This is the soundtrack of your life, a cacophony of sound that never truly stops. You are always a little bit deaf, a persistent, high-pitched ringing in your ears that you've long since learned to ignore. You have to strain to hear the words of a customer, and you often find yourself nodding along, pretending you've heard them, just to avoid the embarrassment of asking them to repeat themselves. The noise is a constant, invisible force that wears you down, a kind of torture that you are forced to endure every day. A mainstream historical fact is that blacksmiths and other tradesmen who worked with loud tools suffered from what we now call industrial deafness. The constant exposure to high decibel sounds would damage their hearing over time, a common and accepted occupational hazard. You are a living testament to this. You can't hear the subtle sounds of the forest, the quiet chatter of the birds, or the soft whispers of your children. All you hear is the low, steady thrum of your work, and you know, deep down, that you are slowly but surely losing one of your most precious senses. Historians still argue whether medieval people understood the long-term effects of noise on their hearing, or if they simply attributed it to old age or a curse. You, however, know that the ringing in your ears is a part of your trade, a permanent mark of your profession. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval guilds had a rule that a smith could not work late at night, not just to conserve fuel, but to spare the neighbours from the constant, jarring sound of the hammer on the anvil. You, in your isolated hut on the edge of the village, have no such rule. You work until the job is done, and the sound of your hammer echoes through the silent night, a lonely, persistent reminder of your toil. The noise is a part of your work, a constant reminder of the brutal, unglamorous nature of your trade. It is the sound of survival, the rhythm of your livelihood. You are a man who works in fire and iron, and you are a man of sound. The sound of the hammer on the anvil is the most powerful, the most pervasive, and the most dangerous of all. It is a sound that has made you, and a sound that is slowly but surely unmaking you. You grab a new piece of raw iron, the cold metal a stark contrast to the heat of the forge. You hold it with your tongs. The familiar weight, a comfort. The rhythmic clang, clang, clang begins again. A sound that is both a curse and a blessing. It is the sound of your life, the sound of your work, and the sound that will follow you to your grave. The world is full of sounds, but for you, there is only one, the one that defines you, the one that is slowly but surely taking your hearing away. The incessant noise of your workshop is a constant companion, but it is not the only force that dictates your life. The seasons, the moon, and the rhythm of the agricultural year are your true masters. The village runs on the harvest, and you, the blacksmith, are a vital part of that cycle. Your busiest times are the spring and the fall, the times of planting and harvesting. In the spring, the farmers come to you with their ploughshares, their hoes, and their scythes, all in need of repair after a long, cold winter. In the fall, they come to you again, their tools worn and dull from the relentless work of the harvest. Your work is a reflection of their work, a constant back and forth between the land and the fire. You are a slave to this cycle. You can't start a new project in the middle of a planting season, not when there are a dozen farmers waiting for their tools. You can't take a day off, not when a single broken ploughshare could mean a family starves. You are not a man who lives by the clock. You are a man who lives by the calendar. A calendar that is not marked with days of the week but with the cycles of the sun and the moon. A mainstream historical fact is that in medieval society, time was not measured in minutes and hours, but in the rhythms of the seasons and the agricultural year. The harvest was the most important event, and all other activities, including trade and craft, revolved around it. You, the blacksmith, were at the mercy of this. Your livelihood was directly tied to the success or failure of the crops. Historians still argue whether this seasonal rhythm was a source of stability or anxiety. On one hand, it provided a predictable and reliable schedule for the year. On the other, it left you vulnerable to the whims of the weather and the unpredictable nature of the land. You, however, know it's a bit of both. You are a part of a beautiful and ancient rhythm, a cycle of life and death, work and rest. But you also know that a single bad harvest could spell ruin for you and your family. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval blacksmiths would keep a large, flat rock on their workbench and mark the phases of the moon on it with a piece of chalk. This was a kind of primitive calendar, a way of keeping track of the seasons and the planting cycles. It was a testament to your quiet knowledge, a way of staying in touch with the world outside of your smoky hut. The work is never ending. You are a man of fire and iron, but you are also a man of the earth. The tools you make are for the land, and the rhythms of the land are what dictate your work. You are a part of the great cycle of life, a vital cog in a system that is far older and more powerful than you are. You grab a new piece of raw iron, the cold metal a stark contrast to the heat of the forge, and you prepare for the next problem. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that is both a testament to your endless work and a part of the great rhythm of the world. The rhythmic clang of your hammer on the anvil is a sound that echoes across the village, a sound of life, of work, of survival, but sometimes it's a sound of death. A messenger from the Lord's keep arrives, his horse's hooves kicking up dust on the lane. He has an order for you, a big one. He needs you to forge a dozen new arrowheads, and he needs them by the end of the week. This is a big job, a good job, and it will put a few extra coins in your pocket. But it's also a grim reminder of your place in the world. You are a crucial part of the war machine, a vital link in the chain of violence and death. You look at the raw iron, and your mind is not on the money, but on the purpose. These arrowheads will not be used to hunt deer or rabbits. They will be used to kill men. You are a creator, a transformer, a man who breathes life into a cold piece of metal. But sometimes, that life is a tool for taking another life. The thought is a heavy weight on your soul, a quiet, insistent dread that you can't escape. You are not a soldier, you are not a knight, and you are not the one who will be fighting the battles, but you are the one who will be making the weapons, and that makes you just as culpable. A mainstream historical fact is that blacksmiths were vital to the war effort in medieval times. They forged not just swords and armor, but 1,000 other tools of war. From arrowheads to spear tips to the iron rings on a shield, their work was essential, and they were often paid handsomely for it, but with that money came a moral cost. A quiet burden that you, the blacksmith, had to carry. Historians still argue whether medieval blacksmiths had a moral framework for their work. Did they see it as just a job, a way to feed their family? Or did they grapple with the ethical implications of creating instruments of death? You, in your smoky hut, don't have the luxury of that debate. You just know that a man with a hungry family can't afford to be a man with a conscience. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval blacksmiths were known to engrave a small symbol or a prayer on their weapons, not for good luck in battle, but to bless the weapon and ask for forgiveness for its use. It was a small act of rebellion, a quiet way of grappling with the dark side of your trade. You look at your hands, calloused and thick with soot and grime. They are the hands of a creator, but they are also the hands of a killer. You are a man who works with fire and iron, a man who brings life to a tool, and a man who is complicit in the taking of another. You grab the first piece of raw iron, the cold metal a stark contrast to the heat of the forge, and you prepare to get to work. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that is both a testament to your endless work and a grim reminder of your place in a world of violence. The messenger from the keep is watching you, a look of impatience on his face. He doesn't see the quiet struggle, the moral burden, the weight of 1,000 potential deaths on your shoulders. He just sees the work, and you, a man who works with iron, have no choice but to do what he asks. The money is too good, and the family is too hungry. You are a man who works with fire and iron, and you are also a man who works with blood and death. The two are intertwined, a constant and inseparable part of your life. The messenger is gone, his impatience a quiet, seething presence that still lingers in the air. You look at the pile of raw iron, the future arrowheads a grim promise of a job well done. But before you get to the weapons, there's another task, one that is just as dangerous and far more unpredictable. A farmer you know, a man named Will, leads his horse into your hut. The horse, a massive, ill-tempered beast, snorts and stomps its hooves, its eyes wide with fear and anger. It needs a new set of horseshoes, a task that requires a strange mix of strength, patience, and a bit of bravery. You are not a farrier, a true horse specialist, but in a small village, you have to be everything. The horse's old shoe is loose, and it has to be removed. You have to work quickly, and you have to work without being kicked in the head. The horse is a living, breathing creature, and it doesn't understand that you are trying to help it. It just feels the heat, the noise, and the strange man with the hammer trying to pull off its shoe. This is not a battle of strength. It is a dance of wills, a quiet negotiation with an animal that could kill you with a single well-placed kick. A mainstream historical fact is that farriery was a distinct and often dangerous trade, but in rural medieval areas it was often the blacksmith who performed the task of shoeing horses. The dangers were immense. From being kicked or bitten to the constant threat of a hoof infection from a poorly placed nail, you, a man who works with inanimate objects, are suddenly thrust into a world of living, unpredictable creatures. You have to be an animal handler, a vet, and a blacksmith all at the same time. Historians still argue whether the skill of a farrier was more a matter of understanding animal behavior or a matter of pure skill with the hammer and nails. You, however, know that it's a bit of both. You have to know how to soothe a nervous horse, how to hold its leg steady, and how to work with a kind of quiet confidence that the animal can sense. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval blacksmiths would tie a red ribbon around their arm before shoeing a horse, a superstition that was believed to ward off evil spirits and keep the horse calm. You've never done it yourself, but you've seen other smiths do it, and you understand the quiet desperation that would lead to such an act. The horse's breath is hot and sweet on your face as you work. You can feel its immense power, the coiled muscles in its legs, the raw strength that it could unleash at any moment. You work with a quiet intensity, your hands moving with a practiced, but tense, precision. You have to hold the hot shoe against the hoof, a dangerous act that requires a great deal of skill and a high tolerance for risk. A single moment of hesitation, a single misplaced blow, and you could be seriously injured. The work is not just about making the shoe, it's about putting it on. You finish the job, the new shoes gleaming on the horse's hooves. You release its leg, and it snorts, shaking its head and stomping its feet. Will, the farmer, gives you a slow, grateful nod, and a few coins change hands. You sigh, a long, weary breath. The work is done, but the memory of the danger, the smell of the horse, and the feel of its hot breath on your face will linger for a long time. You are a man who works with fire and iron, and sometimes with a beast that could kill you. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that feels both a blessing and a curse. The horse is gone, its hooves a fading tattoo on the dusty lane. You're alone again, but the danger hasn't left. It's a constant, invisible presence in your hut, a quiet hum that you've long since learned to ignore. You are surrounded by fire, not just the fire of your forge, but 1,000 smaller, more insidious fires. The stray sparks that fly from the anvil, a tiny, glowing meteor shower that can land on your clothes, your hair, the thatched roof of your hut. A single, misplaced spark could ignite your world, and in a world without fire departments or a quick, reliable source of water, that's a death sentence. Your hands are a map of 1,000 tiny burns, a testament to the constant, low-level danger you face every day. You've learned to move with a kind of second-nature caution, a constant awareness of where the sparks are flying and where your body is. You have a bucket of water nearby, a small, sad insurance policy against a disaster that could engulf your entire life. It's a symbol of your quiet dread, a constant, low-level anxiety that you can never truly escape. A mainstream historical fact is that fire was a constant and terrifying threat in medieval times, especially in a village of thatched roof huts and wooden structures. A blacksmith's workshop, with its open flame and constant stream of sparks, was one of the most dangerous places in the community. You are a man who works with fire, and you are also a man who lives with the constant threat of it. Historians still argue whether medieval blacksmiths had a specific ritual or superstition to ward off fire. Was it just a practical matter of keeping a bucket of water nearby? Or did they have a deeper, more spiritual way of dealing with the danger? You don't have time to ponder such things. You just know that a single gust of wind, a single moment of inattention, and your entire world could go up in a brilliant, terrifying flash. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval builders would place a small piece of lead in the corners of a new house, a superstition that was believed to protect the structure from lightning strikes and fire. You have no such protection. Your protection is in your vigilance, your constant, low-level anxiety, and your knowledge of the fire. You are a man who works with fire, and you have a healthy respect for its power. You know that it is a tool, a servant, but it is also a master that can turn on you in a moment. You look at the glowing embers of your forge, the heart of your workshop, the source of your livelihood, and the source of your deepest fears. It is a beautiful and terrible thing, a primal force that you have to control every day. The silence is broken by a low, insistent crackle, a sound that you are all too familiar with. A new customer, a woman from the village, stands at the entrance, a small, broken pot in her hands. You sigh, a long, weary breath. The moment of rest is over. The work, and the danger, never ends. You are a man who works with fire and iron, and you are also a man who lives with the constant, quiet dread of being consumed by it. The woman with the broken pot is gone, and you're alone again. The only sounds the faint crackle of the fire and the quiet hum of your own exhaustion. You look over at your apprentice, Thomas, who is sitting on a small stool, his head in his hands. He's not resting, he's coughing. It's a deep, hacking cough, a sound that is as familiar to you as your own. He's breathing the same smoke, the same iron dust, the same toxic air that you are, and you know, deep down, that you are responsible for his health. He's a child, and you are slowly but surely exposing him to the same illnesses that will one day ruin you. You've learned to deal with your own pain, your own cough, your own fatigue, but watching him suffer is a different kind of burden. You can see the paleness in his cheeks, the way his eyes are a bit too red, the way his small body is already starting to wear down under the constant strain. You can try to tell him to take a break, to go outside and get some fresh air, but you both know that's not an option. There is work to be done, and he is a vital part of it. A second pair of hands that you cannot afford to lose. A mainstream historical fact is that apprenticeships were not just a contract of labour, but also a contract of care. A master was responsible for the well-being of his apprentice, providing food, shelter, and, in theory, medical care. You, however, know that the medical care is a joke. A few herbs from your wife, a few mumbled prayers, and a hope that the illness won't be too serious. You are a man of fire and iron, but you are utterly powerless in the face of sickness. Historians still argue whether medieval masters genuinely cared for their apprentices, or if they just saw them as a financial asset to be protected. You, however, know that it's a bit of both. You are a good man, and you don't want to see this boy suffer, but you also know that if he gets sick, you'll lose a valuable pair of hands, and your livelihood could be in jeopardy. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval contracts had a specific clause that a master was not responsible for an apprentice's death, a grim reminder of the dangers of the trade. You don't have a contract with Thomas's parents. You have a quiet, unspoken agreement, a silent understanding that his life is now a part of yours, for better or for worse. You look at him, his small body racked with a cough, and you feel a surge of anger and frustration, not at him, but at the world, at the system that forces you to live and work in these conditions, at the trade that demands your body and soul and the bodies and souls of the children you are forced to teach. You are a man of fire and iron, a man who can transform a cold piece of metal into a tool of survival, but you are utterly unable to transform the air in your hut into something that won't make a child sick. You walk over to him and put a hand on his shoulder. He looks up at you, his eyes a mixture of gratitude and fear. "Rest," you say, your voice gruff with exhaustion. He nods, but you both know he won't. He will wait for you to start the next job, and he will be there, coughing, but still working, a quiet, suffering shadow of a man he will one day become. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that feels both a blessing and a curse. The cough that racks Thomas's small body is a grim reminder of your own mortality, a quiet terror that you can't escape. You are a man who works with fire and iron, a man who can fix a plowshare or forge a sword, but you are utterly powerless in the face of a simple fever or a festering cut, a major injury, a serious burn, a deep infection. These are not just setbacks. They are potential death sentences. There is no doctor in the village, no one with the knowledge of modern medicine. There is only a village wise woman, an old crone who uses herbs and incantations to try to heal a body that is already on the verge of breaking. You've seen her work. You've seen her apply a poultice of mashed herbs to a deep cut, a mixture that may or may not help and may very well make things worse. You've seen her mumble prayers over a man with a fever, Her words a quiet whisper in a world of pain. She is a woman of good intentions, but she is no match for a serious infection. And you know, deep down, that a single wrong move could mean the end of your career and the end of your life. A mainstream historical fact is that medical care in medieval Europe was rudimentary at best. Physicians, if they existed at all in a rural area, were rare, and their knowledge was often based on ancient texts and superstitions. Infections from even minor cuts and scrapes were common and often fatal. For a blacksmith, who was constantly working with hot metal and sharp tools, the risk of a life-threatening injury was immense. Historians still argue whether the high death rate from injuries was a result of a lack of medical knowledge or a lack of sanitation. You, in your smoky, grimy hut, know it's a bit of both. You are surrounded by filth, and a single open wound is an invitation for a dozen different kinds of infections. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval blacksmiths would cauterize a wound with a hot iron, a brutal and excruciating practice that was believed to stop the bleeding and prevent infection. You've done it yourself, and you know the pain is a far cry from the easy stories told about it. It's a moment of pure, unadulterated agony, and you know it's a desperate act. You look at your hands, a map of 100 scars and a dozen close calls. Each one is a story of a mistake, a moment of inattention, a price you had to pay for your trade. You are a man who works with fire and iron, a man who is strong and capable, but you are utterly powerless in the face of a single, small microbe. You are a man who can bend a piece of steel to his will, but you are a man who can be broken by a simple fever. You look at Thomas again, his small, frail body racked with a cough. You want to tell him to go home, to get some rest, to get away from this place that is slowly but surely killing him. But you can't. You need him. The work never ends, and the world is a cold, indifferent place. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that is both a testament to your endless work and a grim reminder of your own frailty. The cough that racks Thomas's body is a grim reminder of your own frailty, a quiet dread that you can't escape. You are a man who works with fire and iron, a man who can bend a piece of steel to his will, but you are a man who is utterly powerless in the face of a simple fever or a festering cut, a major injury, a serious burn, a deep infection. These are not just setbacks. They are potential death sentences. There is no doctor in the village, no one with the knowledge of modern medicine. There is only a village wise woman, an old crone who uses herbs and incantations to try to heal a body that is already on the verge of breaking. You've seen her work. You've seen her apply a poultice of mashed herbs to a deep cut, a mixture that may or may not help and may very well make things worse. You've seen her mumble prayers over a man with a fever, her words a quiet whisper in a world of pain. She is a woman of good intentions, but she is no match for a serious infection, and you know, deep down, that a single, wrong move could mean the end of your career and the end of your life. A mainstream historical fact is that medical care in medieval Europe was rudimentary at best. Physicians, if they existed at all in a rural area, were rare, and their knowledge was often based on ancient texts and superstitions. Infections from even minor cuts and scrapes were common and often fatal. For a blacksmith, who was constantly working with hot metal and sharp tools, the risk of a life-threatening injury was immense. Historians still argue whether the high death rate from injuries was a result of a lack of medical knowledge or a lack of sanitation. You, in your smoky, grimy hut, know it's a bit of both. You are surrounded by filth, and a single open wound is an invitation for a dozen different kinds of infections. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval blacksmiths would cauterize a wound with a hot iron, a brutal and excruciating practice that was believed to stop the bleeding and prevent infection. You've done it yourself, and you know the pain is a far cry from the easy stories told about it. It's a moment of pure, unadulterated agony, and you know it's a desperate act. You look at your hands, a map of 100 scars and a dozen close calls. Each one is a story of a mistake, a moment of inattention, a price you had to pay for your trade. You are a man who works with fire and iron, a man who is strong and capable, but you are utterly powerless in the face of a single, small microbe. You are a man who can bend a piece of steel to his will, but you are a man who can be broken by a simple fever. You look at Thomas again, his small, frail body racked with a cough. You want to tell him to go home, to get some rest, to get away from this place that is slowly but surely killing him, but you can't. You need him. The work never ends, and the world is a cold, indifferent place. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that is both a testament to your endless work and a grim reminder of your own frailty. The work is all you have. The clang of your hammer is a loud, confident sound, but it's a sound that will not echo through the ages. You are a man who works with fire and iron, a man who can fix a plowshare or forge a sword, but you are also a man whose work will be forgotten. The tools you make will be used, and then, when they are broken beyond repair, they will be thrown away. The swords you forge will be used in a battle, and then they will rust and be lost to time. Your work is functional, but it is not art, it is a thing of necessity. And when the necessity is gone, so is the work. You look at a small, intricate piece of iron you forged for a church door, a quiet and beautiful thing that took you weeks to make. It's a work of art, a masterpiece, a testament to your skill and your quiet pride. But it's also a part of a door, a thing that will be used and then forgotten. You will never be a great artist, a man whose work is hung in a gallery or celebrated in a song. You will be a man whose work is used, and then it will be forgotten. A mainstream historical fact is that in medieval society, there was a stark division between art and craft. A craftsman like you, who made functional objects, yet was not considered an artist, a man who created things of beauty for their own sake. Your work was utilitarian, and your legacy was in the hands of the people who used it, not in the hands of the people who admired it. Historians still argue whether this division was a result of a lack of appreciation for craftsmanship or if it was simply a reflection of a society that valued utility over beauty. You, however, know that the two are not mutually exclusive. A well-made tool, a sturdy horseshoe, a beautiful hinge, these are all things of beauty. A quiet, unappreciated kind of art. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval guilds, particularly those in the big cities, would hold a masterpiece competition where apprentices would create a single, beautiful work of art to show their skill. But for you, in your small, rural village, the masterpiece is not a work of art, it's a plowshare that lasts for a decade. You are a man whose legacy is in the hands of others, the farmer who uses your plow, the carpenter who uses your nails, the lord who rides his horse with your shoes. Your work will live on, but your name will be lost to time. You will be forgotten. A quiet, anonymous force in a world that is always moving on. The thought is a heavy weight on your soul. A quiet, persistent dread that you can't escape. You look at the small, intricate piece of iron again. It is a masterpiece, a testament to your quiet skill and your quiet pride. You will never get a song for it, and you will never get a medal. But you will have the knowledge that you made something that was good, something that was honest, something that will last. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that feels both a blessing and a curse. The quiet pride you feel in your masterpiece is a small comfort, a quiet victory in a life full of small, grinding defeats. But that victory, and your livelihood, is utterly dependent on one thing: fuel. Your forge is a hungry beast, and it eats charcoal. You look at your dwindling supply, a small, sad pile of black lumps, and you feel a wave of anxiety wash over you. The long winter is coming, a time of cold and deep stillness, and you know, deep down, that you won't have enough fuel to last. This is the hidden struggle of your life, the one that no one else sees. While the farmers are harvesting their crops and the merchants are counting their profits, you are in the woods, a cold, isolated figure with a crude axe in your hand. You have to forage for wood, a task that is physically demanding and often fruitless. You look for fallen trees, for dead wood, for anything that will burn. The cold seeps into your bones, and your hands, already raw and calloused, are numb with cold. You are a man who works with fire, but you are also a man who is constantly fighting against the cold. A mainstream historical fact is that fuel was a major commodity in medieval Europe, and a large part of a blacksmith's labor was in sourcing and preparing their own charcoal. The forests were not a limitless resource, and a blacksmith had to be careful not to deplete his supply or risk angering the local lord who might claim the wood for himself. This was a constant, low-level struggle for survival, a battle against the elements and against the whims of the powerful. Historians still argue whether the price of charcoal was the primary reason for a blacksmith's often precarious financial state. Was it the cost of the raw material, or the difficulty of the labor involved in making it? You, however, know that it's a bit of both. You are a man who works with fire, but you are also a man who works in the cold. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval blacksmiths would use a mixture of animal dung and straw to supplement their charcoal. A crude and smelly but effective way of stretching their fuel supply. You've never had to resort to that. But the thought is a constant, quiet reminder of how close to the edge you always are. You look at the pile of raw iron, a few jobs still waiting, and you know you have a choice to make. Do you use the rest of your charcoal to finish the jobs and make a little money? Or do you save it for the dead of winter, when there will be no work, and the cold will be a constant threat? It's a gamble, a constant, quiet calculation that you have to make every day. You are a man of fire and iron, a man who can bend steel to his will, but you are a man who is utterly powerless in the face of the cold and the endless silent hunger of your forge. The silence is broken by a new arrival, a man on horseback, a noble's coat of arms emblazoned on his shield. He has a job for you, a big one. He needs you to forge a new set of hinges for a great door in the Lord's keep. This is a big job, and it will pay well, but it will also require a lot of fuel. You look at the pile of charcoal, and you know you have to make a choice. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that feels both a blessing and a curse. The man on horseback is gone, his noble's coat of arms a stark reminder of the social distance between you. He left you with a new commission, a job that will bring in a few much-needed coins, but will also eat away at your precious fuel supply. This is the constant tension of your life, the need to work and the need to save. But even with the pressure of the work, you are not a man who is entirely on the fringes. You are a central figure in your small ideal community, a hub around which the village revolves. You are the only man in the village who can mend a broken ploughshare, forge a new horseshoe, or create a new set of hinges for a barn door. The entire agricultural cycle, the very survival of the village, is utterly dependent on your skills. The farmers, the merchants, the housewives, they all come to you with their problems, their broken tools, their impossible demands. You are the one who makes their lives possible, the one who keeps their world from falling apart. A mainstream historical fact is that the blacksmith was a central figure in medieval village life, often living and working in a prominent location at the edge of the community. They were the ones who provided the tools of agriculture, the iron fittings for buildings, and the shoes for the horses that powered the economy. Without a blacksmith, a village would not be able to function. Historians still argue whether this central role gave a blacksmith a quiet kind of power, or if it simply made them a servant to the needs of the community. You, however, know it's a bit of both. You are a vital and necessary part of their world. But you are not a man who is held in high esteem. You are a man of necessity, not prestige. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval villages would grant a blacksmith a small plot of land for his hut, a kind of primitive tax break that was a quiet acknowledgement of his vital role in the community. You, however, have no such luck. You pay your taxes in the same way as everyone else. With a portion of your meagre earnings, the work is never ending. A woman arrives with a bucket with a broken handle, a child with a loose nail in his shoe, a man with a broken axe head. You are a repository of 1,000 different problems, and you are the one who is expected to solve them all. You are a man of fire and iron, a man who can bend steel to his will, but you are also a man who is bound to the needs of his community. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that feels both a blessing and a curse. You are a man of 100 different skills, 1,000 different small dangers, and 100 different small anxieties. But you are a man who is not alone. You have your family, your apprentice, and your community. They might not hold you in high regard, but they need you. And in a world where survival is a constant struggle, that is a kind of value all its own. The work is hard, the pay is low, and the future is uncertain. But you are a vital part of the world. and that is a quiet, weary comfort. The man on horseback is gone. His noble's coat of arms a stark reminder of the social distance between you. He left you with a new commission, a job that will bring in a few much-needed coins, but will also eat away at your precious fuel supply. This is the constant tension of your life, the need to work and the need to save. But even with the pressure of the work, you are not a man who is entirely on the fringes. You are a central figure in your small, rural community, a hub around which the village revolves. You are the only man in the village who can mend a broken ploughshare, forge a new horseshoe, or create a new set of hinges for a barn door. The entire agricultural cycle, the very survival of the village, is utterly dependent on your skills. The farmers, the merchants, the housewives, they all come to you with their problems, their broken tools, their impossible demands. You are the one who makes their lives possible, the one who keeps their world from falling apart. A mainstream historical fact is that the blacksmith was a central figure in medieval village life, often living and working in a prominent location at the edge of the community. They were the ones who provided the tools of agriculture, the iron fittings for buildings, and the shoes for the horses that powered the economy. Without a blacksmith, a village would not be able to function. Historians still argue whether this central role gave a blacksmith a quiet kind of power, or if it simply made them a servant to the needs of the community. You, however, know it's a bit of both. You are a vital and necessary part of their world, but you are not a man who is held in high esteem. You are a man of necessity, not prestige. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval villages would grant a blacksmith a small plot of land for his hut, a kind of primitive tax break that was a quiet acknowledgement of his vital role in the community. You, however, have no such luck. You pay your taxes in the same way as everyone else, with a portion of your meagre earnings. The work is never ending. A woman arrives with a bucket with a broken handle, a child with a loose nail in his shoe, a man with a broken axe head. You are a repository of 1,000 different problems, and you are the one who is expected to solve them all. You are a man of fire and iron, a man who can bend steel to his will. But you are also a man who is bound to the needs of his community. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that feels both a blessing and a curse. You are a man of 100 different skills, 1,000 different small dangers, and 100 different small anxieties. But you are a man who is not alone. You have your family, your apprentice, and your community. They might not hold you in high regard, but they need you. And in a world where survival is a constant struggle, that is a kind of value all its own. The work is hard, the pay is low, and the future is uncertain. But you are a vital part of the world, and that is a quiet, weary comfort. The man on horseback is gone. His noble's coat of arms a stark reminder of the social distance between you. He left you with a new commission, a job that will bring in a few much-needed coins, but will also eat away at your precious fuel supply. This is the constant tension of your life, the need to work and the need to save. But even with the pressure of the work, you are not a man who is entirely on the fringes. You are a central figure in your small, rural community, a hub around which the village revolves. You are the only man in the village who can mend a broken ploughshare, forge a new horseshoe, or create a new set of hinges for a barn door. The entire agricultural cycle, the very survival of the village, is utterly dependent on your skills. The farmers, the merchants, the housewives, they all come to you with their problems, their broken tools, their impossible demands. You are the one who makes their lives possible, the one who keeps their world from falling apart. A mainstream historical fact is that the blacksmith was a central figure in medieval village life, often living and working in a prominent location at the edge of the community. They were the ones who provided the tools of agriculture, the iron fittings for buildings, and the shoes for the horses that powered the economy. Without a blacksmith, a village would not be able to function. Historians still argue whether this central role gave a blacksmith a quiet kind of power, or if it simply made them a servant to the needs of the community. You, however, know it's a bit of both. You are a vital and necessary part of their world. But you are not a man who is held in high esteem. You are a man of necessity, not prestige. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval villages would grant a blacksmith a small plot of land for his hut, a kind of primitive tax break that was a quiet acknowledgement of his vital role in the community. You, however, have no such luck. You pay your taxes in the same way as everyone else. With a portion of your meagre earnings, the work is never ending. A woman arrives with a bucket with a broken handle, a child with a loose nail in his shoe, a man with a broken axe head. You are a repository of 1,000 different problems, and you are the one who is expected to solve them all. You are a man of fire and iron, a man who can bend steel to his will, but you are also a man who is bound to the needs of his community. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that feels both a blessing and a curse. You are a man of 100 different skills, 1,000 different small dangers, and 100 different small anxieties, but you are a man who is not alone. You have your family, your apprentice, and your community. They might not hold you in high regard, but they need you. And in a world where survival is a constant struggle, that is a kind of value all its own. The work is hard, the pay is low, and the future is uncertain, but you are a vital part of the world, and that is a quiet, weary comfort. The noble's emissary has left, and you're back to the quiet, unending grind of your daily work. The clang of the hammer on the anvil is a familiar rhythm, but sometimes that rhythm is broken by a bizarre request, a job that is so unusual it takes you a moment to even comprehend. A woman from the village, known for her eccentricities, approaches you with a peculiar request. She wants you to forge a small iron cross to hang above her hearth, not for religious purposes, but to ward off bad luck. This is the kind of job that requires you to set aside your practical mind and step into a world of superstition and folklore. She stands there, her hands clasped in a silent prayer, her eyes fixed on your grimy face. She doesn't care about the quality of the iron or the strength of the joints. She just cares about the shape, the symbol, the quiet promise of protection. You, a man who deals with the hard, cold reality of metal and fire, have to become a purveyor of hope, a maker of talismans and charms. The request is a bizarre and frustrating one, but you can't say no. Her coins are as good as anyone else's, and her need, however strange, is as real as a broken plowshare. A mainstream historical fact is that blacksmiths were often seen as figures of quiet magic in medieval society. Their ability to transform a cold and dead piece of ore into a useful tool gave them a certain mystique. They were often called upon to make small charms, horseshoes for good luck, or even iron rings to ward off sickness. This was a part of the trade, a strange and unscientific side job that nevertheless paid the bills. Historians still argue whether this association with magic was a source of power for blacksmiths or if it simply made them more vulnerable to the whims of the superstitious. However, know that it's a constant and annoying part of your life. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval women would pay a blacksmith to forge a piece of iron into the shape of a serpent or a fish, a superstition that was believed to help with fertility. You've never had a request like that, and you're thankful for it. The thought of forging a symbol of life when your own work is so tied to death and destruction is a bit too much to bear. You look at the woman, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and quiet desperation. You nod, a silent acknowledgement of her need. You grab a small, thin piece of iron, and you begin to work, not with the brutal strength of your usual jobs, but with a quiet, delicate touch. You are a man of fire and iron, a man who can bend steel to his will, but you are also a man who has to bend to the whims of others. The cross you forge is a simple, unadorned thing, a small, quiet symbol of hope in a world of darkness. You hand it to her, and she takes it with a look of immense gratitude. She doesn't say thank you. She just looks at you, and you know, in her eyes, that you have done more than just forge a piece of iron. You have given her a small piece of quiet hope. The woman with her strange request has left the small iron cross, a quiet weight in her hand. You're alone again, and the silence that follows her departure is a loud and heavy thing. Your world is a small, cramped hut on the edge of a small rural village. You are bound to this place. Your life is dictated by the needs of your community and the demands of your forge. There is no time for travel, no time for exploration, no time for anything but the endless grind of your work. You are an island, a man who is utterly isolated from the world outside your small, smoky kingdom. You've heard the stories, of course. The travelling merchants who talk of great cities with stone walls and grand cathedrals, the pilgrims who talk of faraway lands and exotic peoples, the soldiers who talk of great battles and foreign kings. These stories are like a fire and light show you can never attend. They are a world away, a world you will never see. Your feet, a map of blisters and calluses, are bound to the dirt of your own lane, and your eyes, perpetually squinting against the smoke, have only seen the same faces, the same fields, the same trees for your entire life. A mainstream historical fact is that for the vast majority of people in medieval Europe, life was lived within a very small radius. Most people were born, lived, and died within a few miles of their birthplace. Travel was dangerous, expensive, and time-consuming, and for a tradesman like you, whose business was tied to a specific community, it was nearly impossible. You are a man who is utterly bound to his place, a quiet prisoner in your own workshop. Historians still argue whether this lack of mobility fostered a stronger sense of local identity or if it led to a more provincial and insular world. You, however, know that it's a bit of both. You know your neighbours, you know their children, you know their struggles. You are a part of a community, a small, intricate web of relationships, but you are also a man who has never seen the sea, who has never felt the sun on his face in a foreign land, who has never known the thrill of the new. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval blacksmiths were known as itinerant smiths, travelling from village to village to do specific jobs, but this was a rare and dangerous profession, and you, a family man with a hut and a business, would never even consider it. Your forge is your home, and it is also your prison. The work is never ending. A man arrives with a bent sickle, a woman with a broken hinge on her chest, a child with a loose nail in his shoe. You are a repository of 1,000 different problems, and you are the one who is expected to solve them all. You are a man of fire and iron, a man who can bend steel to his will, but you are a man who is utterly bound to his place. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that feels both a blessing and a curse. You are a man who is part of a community, but you are also a man who is utterly alone. The woman with her strange request has left. The small, iron cross, a quiet weight in her hand. You're alone again. But you are never truly alone. The silence that fills your hut is a deceptive thing. Your wife, Ilara, is always there, a quiet, powerful presence that holds your world together. She is not just a housewife, she is a full partner in your trade. A woman who is as strong and as weary as you are. She doesn't wield the hammer, but her hands are just as raw, her back just as tired, her work is unseen, 1,000 small tasks that keep your family and your business afloat. She manages the accounts, a simple but vital job of keeping track of who owes you what, a few eggs here, a bushel of grain there. She deals with the customers, her soft voice and kind eyes a soothing balm to their impatience and their complaints. She haggles for a better price for your raw materials, her quiet but firm negotiation saving you a few precious coins here and there. She tends to the children, teaches them the ways of the world, and makes sure they are fed, clothed, and as clean as they can be in a hut perpetually coated in grime. A mainstream historical fact is that in medieval artisan households, the wife was often a crucial partner in the family business. She would manage the household finances, deal with clients, and even help with the production. This was not a side job. It was a full, integrated part of a woman's role. You, however, know that it's more than that. It's a partnership of survival, a quiet, unspoken agreement that you are both in this together. Historians still argue whether this partnership in work and life led to a more equitable relationship between husband and wife, or if it was simply a necessity born of a difficult existence. You don't have time to ponder such things. You just know that you and Ilara are a team, a small, weary army fighting for your survival. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some guilds, particularly those in the big cities, were dominated by women, and that wives and daughters of blacksmiths would often learn the basic skills of the trade. Ilara, in a quiet moment, has even learned to use the bellows, and she knows how to temper a piece of steel well enough to save you a few minutes of work. She doesn't have the strength to use the heavy hammer, but she knows enough to be a vital second pair of hands. The work is never ending. A man arrives with a bent sickle, a woman with a broken hinge on her chest, a child with a loose nail in his shoe. You are a repository of 1,000 different problems, and you are the one who is expected to solve them all. But you are not alone. You have your family, your apprentice, and your community. They might not hold you in high regard, but they need you. And in a world where survival is a constant struggle, that is a kind of value all its own. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that feels both a blessing and a curse. You are a man who works with fire and iron, a man who can bend steel to his will, but you are a man who is utterly dependent on the quiet, steady strength of a woman. The quiet strength of your wife, Ilara, is a constant comfort, a silent promise that you are not alone in this brutal world. But even her strength can't protect you from the constant emotional toll of your trade. The physical pain is one thing, a familiar, dull ache that you've long since learned to live with. But the mental and emotional pain is a different kind of burden. You are constantly on edge, constantly worried about the next job, the next customer, the next risk. The stress is a silent killer, a constant, low-level dread that never fully goes away. You are a man who works with fire and iron, a man who is supposed to be strong, unyielding, and unbreakable. But you are also a man who is exhausted, anxious, and deeply, profoundly lonely. Your trade isolates you. You are a part of the community, but you are also a man who is forever on the outside, a dirty, sooty figure who is both needed and feared. The jokes and the friendly banter of the tavern are not for you. You are a man who goes to bed with the taste of smoke in his mouth and the weight of 1,000 small anxieties on his shoulders. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval life was incredibly stressful, with a constant worry about crop failures, disease, and war for a tradesman like you. The stress was compounded by the precariousness of your livelihood. You were always one bad job or one long illness away from ruin. This constant anxiety would have a profound effect on your mental and emotional health. Historians still argue whether medieval people had a concept of mental health or if they simply attributed their emotional struggles to a curse, a spiritual failing, or a physical illness. You, however, know that the pain is real. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval healers would recommend a change of air or a long walk in the forest to soothe a troubled mind. You've never had the luxury of either. Your air is always thick with smoke, and your feet are always tied to your forge. You are a man of fire and iron, a man who can bend steel to his will, but you are a man who is utterly powerless in the face of his own emotional pain. The work is a constant, low-level torment, a series of small, grinding defeats that wear you down, day after day, year after year. The thought of a day without the clang of the hammer, without the heat of the forge, is a beautiful fantasy, a dream you'll never live. You look at your hands, calloused and thick with soot and grime. They are the hands of a worker, but they are also the hands of a man who is deeply, profoundly weary. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that feels both a blessing and a curse. You are a man of 100 different skills, 1,000 different small dangers, and 100 different small anxieties. But you are a man who is utterly alone in his own head. The emotional toll of your trade is a quiet, constant weight, a silent burden that you carry every day. But even in a world of such hardship, there is a glimmer of hope, a small solace in the form of the church, the village priest. A kind and weary man is a familiar face. You see him on Sundays, his voice a soft, quiet prayer in a world of noise and chaos. The church is a place of refuge, a place where you can find a moment of peace, a quiet calm in the storm of your life. But even the church is not a simple, unadorned thing. It has its own demands, its own burdens. The priest needs you to mend a loose hinge on the great church door, to forge a new candlestick for the altar, to fix the bell's clapper. The work is not for profit, it's for the good of the community, and for the good of your soul. But it still requires time, labour, and a bit of your precious fuel. You are a man of fire and iron, a man who can bend steel to his will, but you are also a man who has to bend to the will of the church. A mainstream historical fact is that in medieval society, the church was a central and powerful force in daily life. It was a source of spiritual guidance, but it was also a major landowner and a powerful economic force. For a tradesman like you, the church was both a source of spiritual solace and a financial burden. You were expected to donate your time and your labor, a kind of primitive tax that was a part of your duty to God and to your community. Historians still argue whether the church's influence on the lives of tradesmen was a positive or a negative thing. Did it provide a much-needed moral framework and a sense of community, or did it simply exploit the poor for its own financial gain? You, however, know that it's a bit of both. You are a man who goes to church to find a moment of peace, to hear the words of a kind and compassionate God, but you are also a man who has to work for free, a man who has to give his time and his labor to an institution that is far wealthier than he is. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval churches would have a collection plate made of iron, a quiet and subtle way of acknowledging the blacksmith's contribution to the community. You've never seen one, but the thought is a comforting one. You are a man of fire and iron, a man who can bend steel to his will, but you are a man who is utterly bound to the will of the church. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that feels both a blessing and a curse. You are a man of 100 different skills, 1,000 different small dangers, and 100 different small anxieties, but you are a man who is not alone. You have your family, your apprentice, and your community. They might not hold you in high regard, but they need you, and in a world where survival is a constant struggle, that is a kind of value all its own. The work is hard, the pay is low, and the future is uncertain. But you are a vital part of the world, and that is a quiet, weary comfort. The work for the church is a quiet, weary burden, but it's a burden you accept. The priest is a kind man, and he has a quiet understanding of your world. But the vast majority of your life is spent in your small, smoky hut, a quiet prisoner in your own kingdom. There are, however, rare moments when you are called to a grander stage, when a job requires you to leave your village and your hut and travel to a castle or another town. This is a rare and dangerous occurrence, but it is a part of your trade. A messenger from a distant lord's keep arrives, his face grim and his horse weary. A fire has broken out in the castle's forge, and they need a master blacksmith to help with the repairs. This is a big job, a dangerous job, and it will pay well, but it will also require you to leave your family, to leave your village, and to travel to a world that you know only in stories. The thought is a mixture of fear and excitement, fear of the unknown, of the bandits on the road, of the dangers of a strange town, but also a flicker of excitement, the thought of seeing something new, of working with other smiths, of being a part of a larger world. A mainstream historical fact is that while most medieval tradesmen were bound to their villages, some skilled craftsmen, particularly those with a rare or specialized skill, would travel from one place to another for specific commissions. These itinerant smiths were a vital part of the medieval economy, bringing their skills to places where they were most needed. You are not a true itinerant smith, but you are a man who has to travel when the job demands it. Historians still argue whether these travelling jobs were a source of great wealth or if the dangers of the road made them a risk that was rarely worth taking. You, however, know that the money is too good to pass up. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval charters and laws had specific provisions for a travelling smith, a kind of temporary guild membership that would allow a tradesman to work in a foreign town without a formal apprenticeship. You, however, have no such protection. You are a man who is utterly on his own, a solitary figure in a dangerous and unfamiliar world. You look at your wife, Ilara, her face a mask of quiet worry. She knows the dangers of the road, the risks you will be taking. She knows that you might not come back, but she also knows that you have to go. The family needs the money. You are a man of fire and iron, a man who can bend steel to his will. But you are a man who is utterly bound to the demands of a world that is far bigger than he is. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that feels both a blessing and a curse. You are a man who works with fire and iron, a man who can bend steel to his will. But you are a man who has to leave his world to survive. The prospect of a journey to the Lord's keep is both thrilling and terrifying. You'll go, of course, you have to, but as you prepare to leave, you feel a new dread creeping in, a cold, biting anxiety that has nothing to do with bandits or strange towns. It has to do with the long, silent winter that is coming, and the cold that will soon grip your village. Your forge, a roaring, fiery heart in the summer, is a cold, dead beast in the winter, and you will soon be leaving it behind. You are a man who works with fire, a man whose life is dictated by the heat of the flame. But when the winter comes, the forge becomes a quiet, cold, and desolate place. There is no work. The farmers have put away their tools, the roads are impassable, and the village huddles in its huts, waiting for the spring. You, a man who is used to the constant, oppressive heat of your forge, are suddenly left in the cold. The firewood you've gathered for your home is meagre, and the heat from your small, smoky hearth is not enough to ward off the biting cold that seeps into your bones. A mainstream historical fact is that winter was a time of great hardship for medieval labourers. With no work and no reliable source of income, they would often have to rely on their meagre savings and whatever food they had managed to put away. For a blacksmith, the winter was a time of deep anxiety, a time when a simple illness or a cold snap could mean the end of your life. Historians still argue whether the quiet solitude of the winter months was a welcome respite or a source of deep anxiety and depression. You, however, know that it's a bit of both. The silence is a relief, a quiet calm after a year of constant noise and chaos, but it is also a quiet terror, a constant, low-level dread that never fully goes away. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval blacksmiths would use a special kind of wood in their home fires, wood that was believed to have a more spiritual, warmer flame, a kind of primitive heating system that was more about hope than about science. You've never had access to such luxuries. You look at your forge, the cold, silent beast that is the source of your livelihood. Soon, it will be a cold, silent reminder of your helplessness. You are a man who works with fire and iron, a man who can bend steel to his will. But you are a man who is utterly powerless in the face of the cold. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that feels both a blessing and a curse. You are a man who works with fire and iron, a man who can bend steel to his will. But you are a man who is utterly at the mercy of the elements. The cold is a constant, quiet terror, a silent enemy that you have to fight with your body and your small supply of fuel. But even in the face of such a grim reality, there is still a glimmer of magic, a quiet superstition that gives a touch of light to your dark, smoky world. You are a man of fire and iron, a man who can bend a piece of steel to his will, and in the eyes of many, that makes you a man of quiet, powerful magic. The village folk are always a little bit in awe of you, a little bit afraid. They see the smoke, they hear the clang of your hammer, and they see a man who works with a primal force, a man who is a master of something they don't understand. They come to you with their strange requests, a horseshoe to ward off bad luck, a small iron ring to protect a child from sickness, a piece of metal to bury in the field to ensure a good harvest. These are not just jobs, they are a testament to your quiet power, a quiet, unspoken acknowledgement of your place in the folklore of the village. A mainstream historical fact is that blacksmiths were often associated with magic and the supernatural in medieval society. Their ability to work with fire and metal, to transform a cold, dead piece of ore into a useful tool, was seen as a kind of alchemy, a power that was both feared and revered. This was a holdover from ancient times, when the forge was seen as a sacred place and the smith as a man who was touched by the gods. Historians still argue whether this association with magic was a source of power for blacksmiths, or if it simply made them more vulnerable to the whims of the superstitious. However, know that it's a constant and annoying part of your life. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval blacksmiths would make a pact with a local priest, agreeing to forge a small, religious charm in exchange for a few extra coins. This was a kind of primitive insurance policy, a way of ensuring that you were on the right side of God, a quiet and subtle way of dealing with the constant, low-level fear of being accused of witchcraft. You are a man of fire and iron, a man who can bend steel to his will, but you are also a man who has to bend to the whims of others. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that feels both a blessing and a curse. You are a man of 100 different skills, 1,000 different small dangers, and 100 different small anxieties. But you are a man who is not alone. You have your family, your apprentice, and your community. They might not hold you in high regard, but they need you. And in a world where survival is a constant struggle, that is a kind of value all its own. The work is hard, the pay is low, and the future is uncertain. But you are a vital part of the world, and that is a quiet, weary comfort. The quiet superstitions of the village are a strange and constant part of your life, a quiet acknowledgement of a power you don't feel you have. You're not a magician, you're a tradesman, a labourer, a man who knows the true weight of a hammer and the true heat of a flame. But even in a world of such harsh reality, there is a glimmer of a different kind of artistry, a quiet pride that you feel in your work. You are a man who can create a masterpiece, but your masterpiece is not a work of art, it's a work of utility. A customer approaches you with a request for a new ploughshare. He has a few extra coins, and he wants you to make one that will last him for a lifetime. This is a big job, a difficult job, and it will require all of your skill. You will not be forging a beautiful, intricate piece of art. You will be forging a ploughshare, a simple, unadorned thing that will be used to turn the earth and feed a family. But this, you realize, is your masterpiece. This is your magnum opus. The beauty of this piece is not in its form, but in its function. It will be strong, it will be reliable, and it will last for a lifetime. A mainstream historical fact is that in medieval society, the concept of a masterpiece for an artisan was not a work of art, but a functional object that demonstrated the highest level of skill and craftsmanship. It was a test of a tradesman's ability to create a piece that was both beautiful in its own way and utterly useful. You, however, know that the beauty of a well-made ploughshare is in the way it turns the earth, in the way it feeds a family, in the way it makes a hard life a little bit easier. Historians still argue whether the focus on utility over beauty in medieval art was a reflection of a society that was more practical than aesthetic. You, however, know that the two are not mutually exclusive. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval blacksmiths would sign their work with a small, unadorned mark. A quiet and subtle way of leaving their legacy on a piece that would be used and then forgotten. You have no such mark. Your mark is in the work itself, in the strength of the joints, in the sharpness of the blade, in the quiet promise of a lifetime of use. You are a man of fire and iron, a man who can bend steel to his will. But you are a man who is utterly bound to the needs of his community. The clang of the hammer on the anvil begins again, a sound that feels both a blessing and a curse. You are a man of 100 different skills, 1,000 different small dangers, and 100 different small anxieties, but you are a man who is not alone. You have your family, your apprentice, and your community. They might not hold you in high regard, but they need you, and in a world where survival is a constant struggle, that is a kind of value all its own. The work is hard, the pay is low, and the future is uncertain. But you are a vital part of the world, and that is a quiet, weary comfort. You are a man who works with fire and iron, a man who can bend steel to his will. But you are a man who is a master of utility, and that is a kind of art all its own. The new ploughshare is a masterpiece of utility, a testament to your quiet skill. The farmer who commissioned it left with a slow, satisfied nod, and you are left in the silence of your hut. The rhythmic clang of the hammer on the anvil a fading memory. But even as the work slows, your body does not get a rest. It is a slow, steady decline, a quiet unravelling that you can feel in your bones. Your hands, calloused and thick with soot and grime, are a testament to your work, but they are also a map of your pain. Your joints ache, your muscles protest, and a constant, low-level pain is a part of your daily life. Your hearing is the first to go. The constant, high-pitched ringing in your ears from a lifetime of hammering on metal has left you a little bit deaf. A constant, low-level buzz that you've learned to ignore. You have to strain to hear the words of your customers, and you often find yourself nodding along, pretending you've heard them, just to avoid the embarrassment of asking them to repeat themselves. You are a man who works with sound, but you are a man who is slowly but surely losing one of his most precious senses. A mainstream historical fact is that repetitive strain injuries, chronic joint pain, and industrial deafness were common occupational hazards for medieval blacksmiths. The lack of modern ergonomic tools, safety equipment, and medical care meant that a smith's body would often give out long before his spirit did. You are a living testament to this. Your body is a machine that has been used and abused, and it is now starting to break down. Historians still argue whether the decline of a blacksmith's body was simply a natural part of aging or if it was a direct result of their brutal trade. You, however, know it's the latter. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval guilds had a kind of primitive insurance policy for their members, a small fund that would be used to help a smith who was too old or too sick to work. You, in your small, rural village, have no such protection. You are a man who has to work until his body simply gives out, and then you are a man who is utterly on his own. You are a man of fire and iron, a man who can bend steel to his will, but you are a man who is utterly powerless in the face of his own mortality. The thought is a heavy weight on your soul, a quiet, persistent dread that you can't escape. You are a man who has lived a hard life, a man who has given his body and his soul to his trade. But now, as you sit in the quiet of your hut, you realize that your body is betraying you. The clang of the hammer on the anvil is a sound that feels both a blessing and a curse. You are a man of 100 different skills, 1,000 different small dangers, and 100 different small anxieties. But you are a man who is utterly alone in his own head. The new ploughshare is a masterpiece of utility, a testament to your quiet skill. The farmer who commissioned it left with a slow, satisfied nod, and you are left in the silence of your hut. The rhythmic clang of the hammer on the anvil, a fading memory. But even as the work slows, your body does not get a rest. It is a slow, steady decline, a quiet unravelling that you can feel in your bones. Your hands, calloused and thick with soot and grime, are a testament to your work, but they are also a map of your pain. Your joints ache, your muscles protest, and a constant, low-level pain is a part of your daily life. Your hearing is the first to go. The constant, high-pitched ringing in your ears from a lifetime of hammering on metal has left you a little bit deaf. A constant, low-level buzz that you've learned to ignore. You have to strain to hear the words of your customers, and you often find yourself nodding along, pretending you've heard them, just to avoid the embarrassment of asking them to repeat themselves. You are a man who works with sound, but you are a man who is slowly but surely losing one of his most precious senses. A mainstream historical fact is that repetitive strain injuries, chronic joint pain, and industrial deafness were common occupational hazards for medieval blacksmiths. The lack of modern ergonomic tools, safety equipment, and medical care meant that a smith's body would often give out long before his spirit did. You are a living testament to this. Your body is a machine that has been used and abused, and it is now starting to break down. Historians still argue whether the decline of a blacksmith's body was simply a natural part of aging or if it was a direct result of their brutal trade. You, however, know it's the latter. A quirky tidbit you'll recall is that some medieval guilds had a kind of primitive insurance policy for their members. A small fund that would be used to help a smith who was too old or too sick to work. You, in your small rural village, have no such protection. You are a man who has to work until his body simply gives out, and then you are a man who is utterly on his own. You are a man of fire and iron, a man who can bend steel to his will, but you are a man who is utterly powerless in the face of his own mortality. The thought is a heavy weight on your soul, a quiet, persistent dread that you can't escape. You are a man who has lived a hard life, a man who has given his body and his soul to his trade. But now, as you sit in the quiet of your hut, you realize that your body is betraying you. The clang of the hammer on the anvil is a sound that feels both a blessing and a curse. You are a man of 100 different skills, 1,000 different small dangers, and 100 different small anxieties. But you are a man who is utterly alone in his own head. Your body, once a tool of your trade, is now a cage of pain. The new plowshare, your last masterpiece, lies gleaming on the workbench, but your hands, swollen and stiff, can no longer hold a hammer with the same ease. You are a man who has lived a hard life, a man who has given his body and his soul to his trade. But now, as you sit in the quiet of your hut, you realize that your body is betraying you. The long, slow decline has begun, but as one life fades, another one begins. Thomas, your apprentice, is no longer the clumsy boy who first walked into your hut. He is a man now, his shoulders broader, his hands calloused and strong. He has learned from you, not just the skills of the trade, but the rhythm of your life, the quiet resilience of a man who works with fire and iron. He is a younger, stronger version of you, a man who is ready to take your place. This is your legacy, not the plowshare that will last for a lifetime, but the knowledge that will live on in his hands. You are a man whose name will be lost to time, but your skill, your quiet art, will live on in the hands of a new generation. You are a man who has lived a hard life, a man who has given his body and his soul to his trade, but now, as you sit in the quiet of your hut, you realize that your life was not a series of quiet defeats, but a quiet, unadorned triumph. You are a man of fire and iron, a man who has bent steel to his will, and a man who has left his mark on the world, not in a grand monument, but in the quiet, unappreciated work that makes life possible. The quiet of your hut is now a gentle hum, the rhythmic clang of the hammer a distant echo. The fire, your master, your tormentor, is now a warm, soft glow, a quiet comfort in the deepening twilight. The smoke that once filled your lungs now feels like a warm, comforting blanket, a quiet lullaby of a life well lived. Your body, so long a source of pain, is now just a quiet vessel, a ship that has finally come to shore. The darkness is coming, a soft, velvety darkness that feels like a quiet promise of rest. The fire is dying down, and the world is growing quiet. You are a man who has lived a life of noise and chaos, but you will die in a world of quiet. The work is done. The hammer is still. The fire is a soft glow. The night is here. It is time to rest. End of script. Sweet dreams.